There is a show that started as a 4-minute internet cartoon made by one person, submitted to a network that passed on it, found a home somewhere else entirely, and quietly became one of the most emotionally complex, philosophically rich, and deeply strange pieces of animated storytelling ever made. A show where the colors are warm and the jokes land easy and the characters are goofy and instantly beloved, and where underneath all of that, if you kept watching, if you paid close enough attention, something ancient and aching and enormous was always waiting just below the surface. Something that grew the longer you looked, that revealed new layers every time you came back, that had been building a mythology far more intricate than the cheerful exterior ever suggested. The show is Adventure Time, and tonight we are going all the way to the bottom. The iceberg format works because some things are exactly what they appear to be, and other things are carrying secret weight that would astonish you if you understood it fully. Adventure Time is almost entirely the second kind. The comfortable surface is a cartoon about a boy named Finn and his magical dog named Jake going on adventures in a candy-colored post-apocalyptic world. That sentence is technically accurate. It is also barely the beginning of what the show actually is. So get comfortable. Let the room settle around you. Let the world outside go quiet and far away. We are going to start at the very top of this iceberg and descend, layer by layer, into water that gets progressively colder and darker and more surprising until we reach the parts that only the most devoted fans ever found. The parts that change how everything above them looks when you go back. The secrets and the tragedies and the beautiful hidden architecture of a show that spent a decade building something far more intricate than anyone originally expected. What I want you to notice, as we descend through all of this, is how the pieces connect. Adventure Time is not a show that simply accumulated mythology over 10 seasons the way some long-running properties do, adding lore episodically without a real plan. It is a show that knew where it was going from very early on. That planted details in Season 2 that paid off in Season 8. That built a world whose ruins and relics and background characters were always telling a story more complete than any single episode made visible. That knowledge, once you have it, changes everything. The early episodes look different on rewatch. The jokes carry new weight. Even the background art means something you did not understand the first time through. Let us begin. Layer 1. The surface. What everyone remembers. There is a particular kind of magic that happens when a television show introduces itself and immediately earns your trust. You do not always notice when it happens. You just feel it, that sense of being in good hands, of having found something worth returning to. Adventure Time earns that trust in its first minute. The theme song does not overpromise. It barely promises anything at all. A boy's voice singing about adventure over a handful of seconds of bright, strange imagery. Candy mountains. A sword. A yellow dog bouncing happily beside a human kid in a white hat. Then it is done, and the episode begins, and you are simply watching. That is the surface. That is the first invitation. Finn the human is 14 years old when the series properly begins. He lives in a tree fort somewhere in the land of Oo alongside his best friend and adoptive brother Jake the dog. Oo is a world built in the ruins of our own, though you could watch the show for several seasons before the full weight of that idea settles on you. The landscapes are bizarre and beautiful in equal measure. Candy mountains that shimmer in a warm sun, forests made of crystal that catch light at impossible angles, oceans bubbling with unknown chemistry, kingdoms built from every conceivable material, by every conceivable kind of being. The aesthetic signals warm adventure. It signals fun. It signals exactly the kind of show parents put on for their children without worry, which is part of the point and also part of the cover. Because beneath all of that warmth, beneath the candy and the jokes and the mathematical exclamations and the silly character designs, something much older and heavier is always running. The ruins of human civilization are everywhere if you look. The history buried beneath Oo's cheerful present is catastrophic by any measure you care to apply. The most beloved recurring characters are carrying grief on a scale that most storytelling aimed at children does not attempt, and most storytelling aimed at adults fails to carry with this kind of grace. The surface is genuine, though. The warmth is not fake. The show was not using its accessibility as a Trojan horse to deliver misery to unsuspecting viewers. It was doing something more sophisticated, making the warmth and the weight the same thing, inseparable from each other, because that is how they actually are. Things that are genuinely warm are often warm because they were built in the aftermath of something difficult. The care in them is the care that difficult things produce in the people who survive them. Adventure Time knew this from the beginning. Fiona and Cake fan fiction with a broken heart. Around the third season, Adventure Time introduced what appeared to be a charming standalone episode. Fiona and Cake presented the entire regular cast as gender-swapped alternates. Finn became Fiona, a girl adventurer with the same fundamental heroic spirit. Jake became Cake, a stretchy cat. Princess Bubblegum became Prince Gumball. The Ice King became the Ice Queen. Marceline became Marshall Lee. The episode was produced to look exactly like a normal Adventure Time episode. Same animation style, same pacing, same register of stakes and humor, and character interaction. Viewers watching it for the first time encountered it as a story, and many of them loved Fiona and Cake immediately and completely. There was something freeing about the alternate versions. They had all the warmth of the familiar characters without the accumulated weight of what had happened to them. The episode saves its revelation for the final moments, and when it arrives, it lands differently depending on how much of the show's backstory you carry into the viewing. Everything you just watched was fan fiction. Specifically, it was fan fiction written by the Ice King, who has been reading it aloud to an audience of penguins that all fell asleep somewhere in the first act. He tucks his manuscript carefully away at the end. This lonely, confused old man who has built a world in his imagination where he is the romantic hero, where there is a queen who wants to marry him, where he wins and receives the love he desperately wants, because in the actual world he has none of those things. He has ice. He has penguins. He has a kingdom he rules alone, and a half-forgotten longing for something he cannot name anymore. On the surface, this is a clever structural trick. The alternate adventure was fictional within the fiction. Fun episode, smart conclusion. But if you know what the show eventually reveals about who the Ice King actually is, if you know the specific tragedy that turned Simon Petrikov into the confused old man in the pointy crown, the reading transforms completely. The Ice King's fanfiction is grief, wearing the costume of imagination. He writes a world where he is loved because he used to be loved and cannot remember it. He writes a queen who wants to marry him because he was once engaged to a woman he adored, and something took that away from him so slowly and so completely that he can no longer access the memory of having had her. He writes himself as a hero because somewhere beneath the confusion and the delusion and the centuries of magical corruption, there is still something in him that knows he used to be better than this. The fan fiction is the most honest document the Ice King produces. He reads it to sleeping penguins in a cold, empty kingdom because the stories are the only place where things come out right. Fiona and Cake went on to appear in multiple episodes, always framed as the Ice King's ongoing creative work, growing in complexity and emotional depth with each appearance. They eventually received their own full miniseries in 2023, which used the concept to explore what it means to want a life that has more meaning and more feeling than the one you are actually living. All of it grows from that first image, a lonely old man reading his own stories to sleeping penguins, because the stories are the only place where he wins. Typing the intro, the smallest signal. Before each Adventure Time episode begins properly, there is a moment. The title appears, and in many episodes the letters assemble themselves character by character, as though typed by an invisible hand, as though someone just off-screen is sitting down to compose the name of the story you are about to receive. Click, click, click. The title builds itself in the quiet space before the narrative starts. This is a detail so small that most viewers never consciously register it. It operates below active perception, in the space where atmosphere is built before the audience knows it is being affected. And yet it is characteristic of something true about Adventure Time, which is that the show paid careful attention to everything, including the moments before it officially began. The typing of the title suggests authorship. It suggests that somewhere, someone is deliberately sitting down to tell you this story, treating the act of beginning it as worth marking. This small gesture positions Adventure Time as a story being told rather than simply a thing that is happening, which matters in a show deeply concerned with how stories function, what they do to the people who carry them, and why we keep telling them to each other even when they are difficult. The Ice King tells himself stories because he cannot bear the silence inside his own mind. Finn's past incarnations are chapters in an ongoing cosmic story told across deep time. Marceline processes her 1,000 years of grief through music, which is its own form of story. The show is full of characters who narrate their own lives, who make meaning through the stories they carry, who are as shaped by the stories they tell as by the events those stories describe. Even the smallest detail in Adventure Time is usually doing at least two things at once. Finn is colorblind. Finn wears a white hat that is almost never removed across the show's entire run. It is one of the most immediately distinctive visual signatures in the animation of that era. The rounded white shape with its two small ear-like protrusions, sitting over a face that is usually expressing enthusiasm or concern or some combination of both. The hat is so thoroughly associated with Finn as a character that removing it became a significant narrative moment across multiple episodes. When the hat came off, you knew something different was happening. The production confirmed across various interviews and materials that Finn is red-green colorblind. This connects to the hat in a specific way worth thinking about. White reads identically regardless of how you process color. It does not depend on the red-green distinction that does not function normally for Finn. The choice of a chromatic neutral item as his defining visual marker is consistent with a character design built thoughtfully around the specific way he perceives his world. What is more interesting than the bare fact of the colorblindness is what it implies about Finn's experience of Ooo. This is a world of extraordinary color saturation. Candy kingdoms in every shade of pink and red and coral, crystal forests, the fire kingdom's reds and oranges, Flame Princess herself, whose entire visual identity is built around the color of fire, the Nightosphere's deep purples. How does Finn actually experience all of this? The show does not tell you. Finn does not discuss his colorblindness. There are no scenes simulating his visual perception. His colorblindness is simply a fact of his existence, built into his design from the beginning, never made a plot point or a source of explicit drama, which may be the most realistic treatment possible. Most people who are colorblind simply live in the world as they experience it, and their world is their world, complete and real, even when it is different from someone else's. Every time you watch Finn react with genuine wonder to something visually beautiful and Ooo, you are watching his response to an image you are not quite seeing. The gap between his experience and yours is real, consistent, permanent, and invisible. The "it's all a dream" theory surface version. One of the most persistent theories about Adventure Time is the proposal that everything in the show takes place inside someone's dream. The land of Ooo, Finn and Jake, Princess Bubblegum, the Lich, the whole accumulated mythology, all of it the projected interior of a sleeping mind. Adventure Time gives this theory more structural support than most shows give comparable theories, and the reason is entirely unique to the show: the confirmed canonical existence of Prismo. Prismo is one of the most cosmologically important figures in the entire franchise. He lives at the center of time, grants wishes that reshape realities, forms genuine friendships that affect the course of the narrative. He is essential, not peripheral, and Prismo exists because an old man is sleeping. He is the literal dream of a sleeping person, made fully manifest. The dream and the dreamer are as causally entangled as any two things in the show. Prismo has real relationships, real memories, real emotional responses. He is also, unambiguously, a dream. Both are simultaneously true, and the show treats both as equally real. If Prismo can be a dream made fully manifest, the theory asks, what else might share that nature? The question is not absurd. Adventure Time raised it first. We will return to it much deeper down, where the evidence becomes considerably harder to dismiss. If you are settling in for a long rest tonight, drop a comment and tell me where in the world you are and what time it is there. I love knowing where these videos reach. And if you have not subscribed yet, now is a good moment, because everything from here descends into water that gets considerably more interesting the deeper we go. Layer 2. The Sunlight Zone. The things dedicated fans know. One level down. The light is still reaching us here, still filtered through from the surface, but it has a different quality. We are in the territory of things that active Adventure Time fans have discussed at length, that show up in dedicated wiki pages and careful video essays and the late-night comment sections where people who really watch the show go to compare notes. These are not secrets in the sense of being hidden from everyone. They are the things you find when you look slightly more carefully than the surface requires. The snail in every episode. In almost every single episode of Adventure Time, there is a snail. He is small and unobtrusive. He appears somewhere in the background of a scene, doing nothing that affects the plot, usually waving at the camera with one small tentacle extended. He is easy to miss. He is almost never relevant to anything happening in the foreground. He is just there, episode after episode, consistent and quiet, waving from the margins. The Snail began as a production tradition. The Adventure Time crew had built a culture of hiding things in their episodes, of rewarding the specific kind of viewer who paused and looked at the corners and backgrounds of scenes, rather than watching only what the foreground was directing them toward. This culture ran through the entire production and produced a remarkable number of background details that repaid close attention. The Snail was the most consistent expression of this impulse, appearing in nearly every episode across the hundreds of episodes the show produced, a hidden constant across the enormous variety of settings and tonal registers it moved through. For a long time, the Snail was purely a joke, a running Easter egg, a Where's Waldo element that gave the fandom something to hunt for in each new episode. Some viewers made a dedicated project of spotting him in every episode. The production team acknowledged his existence when asked, with the good humor of people who enjoy a private joke that turns out to be more widely shared than expected. Then, in Season 2, the Snail did something that nobody expected, and that retroactively changed everything about every previous appearance. In Mortal Folly, the episode that formally introduced the Lich as the show's primary antagonist and the most genuinely frightening thing in the Adventure Time universe, the Snail appears in the background as usual. Except his eyes are wrong. They carry the specific bilious green glow that Adventure Time uses consistently throughout the show to signal possession by the Lich. The Snail is being controlled. The Lich used him as an instrument of escape from the Amber Prison, where the legendary hero Billy had sealed him long before the main series began. The beloved background Easter egg was the Lich's chosen tool for the most important act of freedom he would achieve. The waving background gag was the most ancient evil in the Adventure Time universe escaping containment. In Mortal Recoil, the Snail appears again with the same green eyes, still carrying traces of possession even after the Lich has moved on to a different host. Eventually, the possession fades. The Snail recovers. He goes back to waving from the background of subsequent episodes. But you know now. You know what he experienced. You know the most ancient evil in the multiverse passed through his small body and used him to accomplish an escape that set the entire major mythology of the show in motion. The wave at the camera carries a different quality from this point forward. Not exactly menace. More like the gesture of a small creature who went through something and chose, for whatever reasons a snail might have, to keep showing up anyway. To keep waving. To keep being present at the edges of other people's stories? The Snail is absent from very few canonical episodes. Food Chain, guest-directed with a different visual approach, does not include him. The Distant Lands special Obsidian is another technical absence, though his shell appears in a background detail if you know to look. The first Distant Lands episode BMO is the first fully canonical Adventure Time episode to exclude him entirely, and the fandom noticed immediately, and the production acknowledged the significance quietly. A small snail waving from the edge of every frame, episode after episode, across hundreds of episodes. One of the most satisfying recurring elements in the whole show because it operates on so many levels simultaneously without ever announcing that it is doing so. You feel the warmth of the recurring joke. You feel the horror of the possession. You feel, afterward, something like genuine affection for a small creature who keeps showing up regardless of what has been done to him. All of those things at once. All of them genuinely present in a single repeated image of a small figure waving from a doorway or a windowsill or the corner of a scene. Martin Mertens, the father who cannot stay. Finn spent years in Adventure Time wondering about the parents he never knew. He was found in the woods as an infant, taken in by Jake's parents Joshua and Margaret, raised alongside Jake as their own. The show built Finn's longing for information about his biological origins slowly and quietly, letting it develop in the background of stories ostensibly about other things, letting the audience feel the shape of the absence before anyone named it directly. Martin Mertens arrives much later in the show's run, and his arrival is one of the most carefully calibrated emotional subversions the show ever produced. The expectation built around Martin's appearance is enormous. Finn has wanted to understand his origins for so long, and the character the show implies has been present in the world all along is finally findable, that when Martin appears, you arrive at the encounter ready for something significant, a reckoning. A conversation that has been building for years. Some movement toward the understanding or confrontation or healing that the shape of Finn's story seems to require. Martin is charming. This needs to be stated first because it is the source of everything else about him. Martin is genuinely, infectiously charming in the way that some people are charming as a survival mechanism, as a substitute for the deeper capacities they have lost access to. He talks constantly. He deflects with the practiced ease of someone who has been deflecting his whole life. He occupies a psychological space where accountability for his choices simply does not register as a relevant concept. The effects of his decisions on other people are information he receives and immediately sets aside. He is not cruel in any obvious way. He does not dismiss Finn or express contempt for him. He just cannot hold Finn's needs and his attention long enough to actually respond to them meaningfully. Every time Finn reaches towards something real, Martin slides away, charming and unreachable, leaving Finn holding a hand that closed around nothing. The theory that has developed among close observers is that Martin did not begin this way, that whatever events led to his imprisonment in the Citadel, that extraordinary multiverse prison housing the most dangerous criminals from across all of reality, those events changed him at something more fundamental than a personality level. That the brain damage people suspect he carries is literal rather than metaphorical. That some combination of his experiences and possibly the Citadel's own effects altered his capacity for sustained emotional engagement in ways that make the present's genuine parental love requires impossible for him now. The show provides enough texture for this reading without confirming it. Brief glimpses of Martin's past suggest a man capable of engagement, who made choices that reflected priorities beyond his own immediate comfort. The person who eventually drifts out of Finn's story has the quality of someone whose capacity for connection has been damaged, rather than someone who never had it. What matters for Finn is the specific cruelty of not getting what the story seemed to promise. Martin exits the narrative not through confrontation or earned resolution, but by ascending with the catalyst comet into a different form of existence altogether, leaving without the conversation because he is structurally incapable of having it. That is somehow worse than deliberate cruelty, and Adventure Time knows it. Gunther is 8 trillion years old. The precise figure cited in various Adventure Time fan resources for Gunther's true age is 8,383,939,300,202 years. That number is worth sitting with. The current scientific estimate for the age of the observable universe is approximately 13.8 billion years. Gunther's cited age is more than 600 times the age of the universe, which in Adventure Time's cosmology means he predates the current arrangement of matter and energy entirely. He predates stars. He predates galaxies. He is older than the conditions that allowed the universe to become the kind of place that contains any of the things Adventure Time is about. Gunther appears to be a small penguin, the Ice King's most constant companion. He smashes things. He knocks glasses off counters. He pushes objects off shelves with cheerful, purposeless energy. He waves his small flippers. He makes small penguin sounds. He is, in every visible way, simply a small animal, with no particular inner life beyond immediate sensation and a general direction of causing minor property damage. Gunther is Orgolorg, the breaker of worlds. Orgolorg is one of the most ancient entities in the Adventure Time multiverse. He predates predates the Mushroom War, predates human civilization, predates all of the relatively recent history that Adventure Time's narrative is built around. Before his compression into penguin form, he was an entity of cosmic scale whose primary ambition was absorbing catalyst comets, those periodic cosmic forces of fundamental change that arrive approximately every 1,000 years to alter the direction of life on Earth. The power accumulated from absorbing catalyst comets, in a being of Orgolorg's native scale, would have been effectively unlimited. When Orgolorg attempted to intercept a yellow catalyst comet carrying the essence that would eventually incarnate as Finn, Abraham Lincoln, King of Mars, dispatched the four-faced deity Grob-Gob-Globgrod to intervene. They incapacitated Orgolorg and sent him falling toward Earth. The planet's gravity and atmospheric pressure compressed Orgolorg's enormous form over thousands of years, pressing his vast cosmic presence down into something that occupies the space of a small aquatic bird. The name Gunther is approximately what happened to Orgolorg under extreme phonetic and physical compression. The Ice King found this small, waddling creature at some point in his centuries of existence and has kept it ever since, entirely unaware that his most constant companion is a cosmically ancient being of extraordinary power that has been physically compressed by divine intervention and the laws of planetary physics. Inside the penguin, the memories are dormant but present. In one episode, the penguin's head cracks slightly and a pulsating brain becomes visible, receiving signals from somewhere very distant. He carves small wooden figures of cosmic entities in the Ice King's woodworking space. He reacts to references to catalyst comets in ways that suggest something deep in him is responding to signals the penguin body is not designed to receive. Hunson Abadir, the Lord of Evil and Marceline's father, identifies Gunter during a visit to the Ice Kingdom as possibly the most evil being he has ever encountered. He says this with the casual confidence of someone stating something too obvious to require elaboration, then moves on without pressing the point. This occurs in Season 2. The episode Orgalorg, that confirms what Gunter actually is, does not air until Season 6. For 4 full seasons, the Lord of Evil's observations sat in the background of the show as a confirmed piece of information attached to an explanation that had not yet arrived. The Lord of Evil recognized what was inside the small penguin. Almost nobody else did. Jake's powers, the mud puddle was a lie. Jake has a story about how he got his stretchy powers. He tells it in an early episode with the matter-of-fact ease of someone relating a piece of personal history they have never had reason to doubt. He rolled around in a magical mud puddle when he was a puppy, and the puddle gave him his abilities. Pendleton Ward stated in an interview that Jake's mud puddle story is not true. Jake simply does not remember correctly, and since nobody who knew the actual origin was around to correct him, he has been carrying the wrong explanation for one of the most fundamental facts about himself his entire life. What actually happened arrives in Joshua and Margaret Investigations, a flashback episode following Jake's parents and their detective work years before Jake was born. Joshua and Margaret were tracking a creature called Warren Ampersand, a shape-shifting extra-dimensional alien of considerable power and completely unconstrained personal ethics. During the investigation, Warren bit Joshua on the head. The bite transmitted Warren's alien shape-shifting DNA into Joshua's biology, creating a growth from which Jake was eventually born. Jake emerged carrying alien genetic material from a being who had infected Joshua as part of a long-term strategy, and that genetic material manifested as the stretchy, shape-shifting powers that define much of his identity in the show. When Warren appears in the present-day timeline and approaches Jake with apparent warmth, taking him to what seems to be a planet built in his honor, complete with a museum documenting Jake's life and photographs establishing that Warren has been watching from backgrounds of important moments, the warmth sits in deeply uncomfortable relationship with what Warren actually wants. Warren reveals his real agenda. He has done this before, with other children on other worlds. His system is to infect a host with his DNA, allow a child to be born and grow to maturity, approach the child with fabricated connection, and then drain the child's inherited shape-shifting powers back into himself. His previous children, spread across multiple worlds, are husks. Jake was always supposed to be the next one. Jake defeats him and throws him into a black hole. Warren's final words, "I'm going 4D, baby," leave his ultimate fate technically ambiguous. The Warren storyline matters most for what it says about Jake, not Warren. Jake's goodness, his warmth, his philosophical ease with the world, his devoted love for the people in his life, none of that came from Warren. It came from Joshua and Margaret, who raised him with genuine care. It came from Finn, who grew up beside him. It came from Lady Rainicorn and their children, and from years of choosing, again and again, who he wanted to be. The origin does not own the destination. Jake is living evidence of this principle, made warm and funny and completely convincing. Layer 3. The Twilight Zone, where the wait begins. The light changes here. We have left the territory of things that active community members know, and we are moving into the territory where the emotional architecture of the show reveals its full structural weight. The comedy is still present, because Adventure Time never abandoned comedy entirely, but the darkness is structural at this depth rather than incidental. These are the things that hit differently when you are ready for them. Simon Petrikov, a man consumed by what he chose. Simon Petrikov did not want to live forever. This is the foundational truth of his story, and the fact that all the tragedy of the Ice King flows from. He was a man who made a specific choice, knowing what it would cost him, paid that cost completely, and the immortality he received in exchange was not a gift. It was the price of a completely different transaction. Before the crown, Simon was an antiquarian. The profession, the study and collection of ancient objects and artifacts, the work of extracting meaning from old things, was both his career and his genuine passion. He cared about history. He cared about the way objects carry time inside them, the way something old enough holds within its physical existence the traces of the moments and the people it has passed through. He was academically rigorous and personally kind. He wore glasses. He was in love with a woman named Betty Groff, who was herself a scholar, and they had found each other at a professional conference in the specific way that people who care deeply about the same unusual things sometimes find each other when the world gives them the opportunity to be in the same room. The small details of how Simon and Betty met are worth carrying. She had admired his research before they encountered each other in person. At the conference, they reached for the same book at the same moment. She introduced herself afterward and pointed out runes in his published work that suggested a direction he had not yet pursued. These are the details of two people who are going to be very important to each other. The particular texture of a beginning that the people in it do not yet know is the beginning of everything. Then, during an expedition to Scandinavia, Simon purchased a crown from a dockworker, a casual transaction. The kind of artifact acquisition an antiquarian might make dozens of times across a career, rarely with particular significance. He brought it home to show Betty, put it on as a light joke, as something to make her laugh, and did something under the crown's influence so terrible that Betty left and never came back. He has no memory of what occurred during the blackout. He never learned what it was. He only knows there is a gap in his recollection where something happened, and then he was alone, and the gap widened as the crown's hold deepened with each subsequent use. The crown grants ice powers. It grants a form of immortality. It takes the mind, slowly and systematically, wearing away at identity and memory and the capacity for coherent self-reflection. Each use accelerates the process. The person Simon Petrikov was erodes by pieces, replaced gradually and then more quickly by the confused figure who calls himself the Ice King and has lost access to every specific memory that made him Simon, retaining only the echoes of feelings whose sources he can no longer locate. The tragedy is not that Simon put the crown on once. The tragedy is that he kept putting it on. During the Mushroom War, in the ruins of the world, he found a small girl who had been separated from her dying mother. He used the crown's power to keep her warm and safe and fed. He used it to frighten away the dangers of the post-war landscape. He used it knowing with every instance that he was accelerating his own dissolution, choosing repeatedly to lose himself by pieces so that she could survive. That child was Marceline. The letter Simon wrote to Betty, when he was still coherent enough to understand what was happening to him and terrified enough to document it, is read aloud in I Remember You, one of the most acclaimed episodes in the show's entire run. Simon describes the fear of feeling himself change. He describes the blackouts and the gaps and the sense of himself receding from his own life. He says he hopes his princess will understand why he had to keep using the crown. He calls Betty his princess because the crown was already doing its work, already beginning to blur the specific beloved person, Betty Groff, who pointed out runes in his book and who reached for the same thing he reached for, into an archetype, a title, a category. The crown wanted a princess and was starting to substitute the category for the person. When Marceline grew up into the vampire queen, when 1,000 years passed and she was old enough to go looking for what Simon had become, the Ice King standing before her had no memory of her. He did not recognize the girl he had kept alive across years of post-war wandering. He did not remember the songs he sang to her, or the stuffed toy he gave her, or the goodbye he said when he knew he could no longer safely stay. When Marceline met the Ice King, she was meeting the shell of someone she loved, animated by the crown's fantasy of someone else entirely. She visits anyway. She shows up and tolerates his peculiarities and brings him food and maintains whatever version of the relationship the situation allows, because even a ghost is better than nothing, because the body is the same body and somewhere inside the confusion, the person she loved used to live. The crown itself was built 65 million years ago by a mage named Evergreen, who was trying to stop a catalyst comet from causing an extinction event. The crown was designed to grant the deepest wish of whoever wore it to provide the power to stop the comet. When Evergreen died before the crown's activation, his apprentice, a young dinosaur named Gunther, completed the first use. Gunther's deepest wish was to be like his master. The crown shaped him in Evergreen's image and erased the young dinosaur in the process. When Simon Petrikov put the crown on thousands of years later, the crown's oldest and deepest imprint was still Gunther's wish to be the man he loved. Simon was gradually shaped into the Ice King in the image of what the crown's oldest memory wanted him to become. The Ice King is, at the bottom of everything, a very old grief. A prehistoric creature's love for a cold and demanding teacher crystallized inside a magical object, replaying itself in host after host across 65 million years. Finn's past lives, the force that keeps returning. The full scope of Finn's past lives arrives gradually, built from scattered pieces that the show plants across multiple seasons before assembling them into something that changes how the whole picture looks once you have it whole. It is one of Adventure Time's most characteristic structural techniques. The slow accumulation, the patient reveal, the moment when enough pieces are in place that the shape of the whole becomes suddenly visible. It begins with the vault. Finn mentions a place in his mind where he seals things he does not want to think about. After something disturbing happens, he closes a mental door on it and the disturbance ceases to bother him. The vault is described as a coping mechanism, a way of managing the psychological weight of adventures that regularly produce genuinely frightening experiences. It sounds like a colorful metaphor for ordinary repression. The episode The Vault opens what Finn has been keeping behind that door, and what emerges is Shoko, a girl who lived and died hundreds of years before Finn was born. Shoko was a thief in the early post-war period, one-armed and sharp and operating for a crime boss who deployed her against various targets. She was hired to steal Princess Bubblegum's most prized amulet, and during the mission she formed an unexpected genuine friendship with Bubblegum that complicated her ability to complete the job. Then Shoko was betrayed by her employer, fell into the radioactive river Bubblegum had warned her about, and died. She died still holding the amulet. Her ghost remained beneath the site where Finn and Jake's tree fort eventually stood, still trying to complete the task across centuries. Shoko was Finn's previous incarnation. The same essential soul or force or quality that animates Finn had in a previous body been Shoko. The vault sealed her memories away until the moment when Finn was ready to confront them. The show then goes further back than Shoko. In the Season 6 finale, The Comet, the full mythology of what Finn actually is receives its clearest articulation. Catalyst comets are cosmic entities that arrive on Earth approximately every 1,000 years, carrying forces of fundamental change. The green comet that preceded the Mushroom War carried a force of ending, of extinction, and it was the physical form of the Lich's soul deposited on Earth 65 million years ago. But the comets carry their opposites as well. One carried a force of life, of heroism, of the particular quality of reaching toward others and toward what is good that defines Finn in every situation the show puts him in. That force has been reincarnating across enormous stretches of time. Shoko was one expression. Before her, a butterfly. Before that, other forms. The purple catalyst comet that appears in the Season 6 finale confirms this directly, telling Finn it has known him across many forms and many lives. It offers him a choice. Leave the embodied world and exist as the comet itself, as pure cosmic potential, free of mortality and loss. Or return to Ooh and continue being a mortal boy in a world that will eventually take him. Finn chooses to return. He has always chosen this. Every incarnation of the force he carries has made the same choice. The embodied world, with all its grief and uncertainty and definite ending, over the cold spaciousness of cosmic dissolution. Martin, his father, is nearby at the moment of decision. Martin makes the opposite choice and leaves with the comet. The two decisions, made in the same place at the same time, say everything that needs to be said about both of them. Jake is dead in Obsidian. The Adventure Time. Distant Lands Special Obsidian follows Marceline and Princess Bubblegum, now explicitly a couple, traveling to a kingdom of glassblowers to address a reawakened threat. It is emotionally rich and musically gorgeous, expanding their relationship with the depth a decade of slower storytelling made possible. It is excellent Adventure Time. Jake does not appear in it. For a character who is one of the two central protagonists of the entire franchise, this absence is unusual in a way the episode does not acknowledge directly. When Jake is referenced, the language is careful in a way that attentive viewers read as deliberate circumspection around a specific fact the episode is not yet positioned to state openly. The reading that most of the Adventure Time fan community arrived at quickly, and that has been treated as essentially confirmed by subsequent material, is that Jake has died by the time Obsidian takes place. The Distant Lands specials are set some years after the conclusion of the main series. Jake was already aging visibly in the later seasons. The show had established clearly that Jake's lifespan is finite in ways that Marceline's and Bubblegum's are not. He was always going to leave before them. The fourth Distant Lands special, Together Again, provides what amounts to direct confirmation, following Finn in the afterlife after his own death and depicting his eventual reunion with Jake, who went ahead of him. Jake died before Finn. The reunion between them is one of the most genuinely moving sequences in anything Adventure Time produced, earning every bit of its weight through the decade of relationship the show had built between these two. Jake spent his life being the warmer one, the one who found more ease in existence than Finn did, whose philosophical approach to problems was sometimes wrong in its conclusions but always right in its spirit. He made breakfast. He gave advice, occasionally terrible advice, delivered with complete confidence. He loved Lady Rainicorn completely and built a family with her. He was funny and strange and profoundly good-natured at the level where character actually lives, below strategy and presentation, in the place where people show you who they are when nothing requires them to perform. He died off-screen, between specials, in the quiet way that beloved things leave. The world continued. The people who loved him carried the fact of his absence forward into every day after. The pillow world, the life that had to be left. In Season 5's Puhoi, Finn falls through a small portal hidden in a pile of couch cushions and arrives in a world made entirely of soft materials. The pillow world is warm and gentle in its colors, populated by beings made of fabric and stuffing, a whole civilization constructed from the stuff of comfort. The architecture is rounded. The landscape yields underfoot. Everything is soft. Nothing has sharp edges. Finn cannot find the portal home. Days pass. He waits longer. The portal does not reappear, so Finn makes a decision the show almost never requires of him. He stops looking for a way out of where he is and starts building a life in the place where he is. In the pillow world, Finn grows old. He falls in love with a woman named Roselinen. Children come, the children grow. Finn ages in a way that animated characters are rarely permitted to age, genuinely and visibly, decades accumulating on him. The hero becoming an old man in a soft world he never intended to inhabit. He is happy, in the register of happiness that people achieve when they stop reaching toward what they wanted and learn to love what they have. He loves Roselinen. He loves their children. He loves the pillow world in the genuine way you can love something you never chose. Then the portal home reopens, and Finn has to decide. He goes home. The decision is immediate. The reflex of someone whose identity is tied to his original world in ways that decades in a different world have not dissolved. He cannot stay when the way back is open. He is Finn of Ooh even after all those decades of being Finn of the pillow world, and when the door opens, he goes through it. The portal closes behind him. He is back in Ooh, young again, the pillow world decades already beginning to fade the way dreams fade in the morning. The episode does not linger on what this cost. It trusts you to carry the weight yourself. Roselinen is still there. Their children are still there. The pillow world continues somewhere in the structure of the Adventure Time multiverse, with people in it who had a father and a husband and then one day did not. Layer 4. The Midnight Zone, where the darkness is structural. The true scale of the Mushroom War? The Mushroom War is present in every frame of Adventure Time, even when it is not mentioned. It is the foundational event, the thing that made Ooh what it is. And the show communicates its weight through accumulated detail rather than direct depiction. In the 8th season episode High Strangeness, a graph appears briefly in a scene with an administrative context. The graph shows Earth's human population over time. The shape is familiar. Gradual growth across recorded centuries, a small drop in the 1300s corresponding to the Black Death, continued growth through the modern era. Then the line falls off the chart. Not a decline, a vertical collapse that communicates near total annihilation. The Mushroom War did not merely damage human civilization, it reduced the human population to something approaching nothing. Finn's existence as a human being in the main series is not unusual in the way being left-handed is unusual. It is unusual in the way that being a surviving member of a species reduced to effective extinction is unusual. The humans who built the civilization whose ruins carpet every landscape in Adventure Time were essentially wiped out. Princess Bubblegum refers to the Candy Kingdom as an eternal empire in one episode, and this is not simply grandiosity. She has been governing this territory for over 800 years, maintaining the structures of civilization in the absence of the species that previously built those structures. She is the continuity between the pre-war world and the post-war one, filling the organizational and governmental space that humans vacated with new beings she helped create and continues to tend. The weapon at the center of the worst of the devastation is called the mushroom bomb, and its name makes the nuclear reference explicit. But the mushroom bomb was not simply nuclear. It combined conventional destructive force with mutagenic energy that altered the biology of everything exposed to it. The explosion caused a geological event. A massive section of Earth's crust is simply absent, visible from space as an enormous crater, suggesting a detonation whose scale exceeded anything purely nuclear in our understanding. The life that survived did so by changing. The candy people, the elemental beings, the rainicorns, the demons, the monsters, the vast variety of strange sentient creatures that populate Ooh, many of them are what happened when the mushroom bomb's mutagenic energy moved through existing biology and rewrote it into something new. The post-war world is simultaneously a ruin and a genesis. The death of one world generating the conditions for another, and the new world is genuinely wondrous in its variety and strangeness, even as it is built entirely on catastrophe. The war is always in the background, in the rusted metal and the crumbled buildings, and the abandoned infrastructure and the craters that have become lakes. In Finn's existence as the last or near-last human, in Princess Bubblegum's centuries of institutional memory, in Marceline's 1,000 years of wandering, in Simon Petrikov's preserved and broken mind, maintained far longer than he wanted to be maintained. Everything in Adventure Time is downstream of the war. Everything. Princess Bubblegum's dark interior. Bonnibel Bubblegum did not have parents in any conventional sense. After the Mushroom War, the mutagenic energy and the specific chemical conditions of the post-war environment combined and produced the Mother Gum, a large and gradually expanding biological entity made of pink material that developed a collective form of sentience as it grew. Princess Bubblegum and her brother Nettie were the first portions of the Mother Gum to individuate, to separate from the collective and develop distinct personalities and the ability to exist independently. As a young child, Bonnibel was essentially alone with Nettie in the post-war ruins. No parents in any functional sense, no community. No one to provide guidance about what was appropriate, where the limits were, what kinds of power required, what kinds of restraint. She lived near a radioactive river that she knew was dangerous and around which she later built the Candy Kingdom. She was lonely with the specific loneliness of a being with enormous intelligence and no one adequate to talk to, and so she did what a highly capable being does when it has the resources and no external check on what it can do. She manufactured what she wanted. Uncle Gumbald was built from gum material and given life through the same processes that had produced Bonnibel herself. Then Aunt Lolly and Cousin Sheikle. A constructed family, a manufactured support structure, the specific people she wanted to have around her brought into existence because she could bring them into existence. She was happy, briefly, with the happiness of a child who has made exactly the thing she wished for. Then Gumbald attempted to overthrow her. He had developed genuine ambition and genuine grievance, had conspired with Lolly and Sheikle against Bonnibel, and was planning to depose her and take control of the territory she was beginning to build. She discovered the plot before it could be executed. Her response to the conspiracy reveals the shape of her governance with complete clarity. She did not exile the conspirators or reason with them, or establish some form of negotiated settlement. She converted them into simple candy people, stripped of the sapience that made them capable of conspiring against her, reduced to the kind of cheerful, uncomplicated citizens who inhabit the Candy Kingdom's background without any capacity to mount effective challenge to its leadership. By the time of the main series, the Candy Kingdom's population is generally portrayed as childlike and sweet and occasionally panicky, fundamentally innocent, charming in their simplicity. They are also, in the show's implicit structural logic, a population that cannot effectively challenge the person who created them and maintains them. The show does not state this as a condemnation. It simply shows it and leaves the evaluation to the viewer. Princess Bubblegum loves the Candy Kingdom genuinely. She has devoted centuries to its welfare. She fights for her people's safety with everything she has and with genuine care for the individuals, not just the collective. She also makes utilitarian decisions that look monstrous from outside the utilitarian framework she has adopted. She sends soldiers to their deaths knowing she can clone them afterward, treating their mortality as an administrative fact rather than a moral one. She creates beings who suffer. She watches crises unfold that she helped set in motion without always acknowledging her role in their genesis. She is not a villain. She is something more honest and more complicated. A ruler who has been governing a civilization for centuries without adequate oversight, who has made the specific compromises that centuries of responsibility and power produce, who genuinely cannot always access the perspective of people lower in the structure she maintains, because she has been at the top of that structure for so long that the view from anywhere else has become abstract to her. Her relationship with Marceline is one of the central emotional relationships in the show, and it is complicated by exactly this tension. Marceline's wildness, her fundamental comfort with chaos and darkness and things that resist management, her refusal of the kind of control that Bubblegum finds necessary, is precisely what makes Marceline difficult for Bubblegum, and also precisely what Bubblegum needs. Order and chaos, control and freedom. The show handles the tension between these orientations in their dynamic with more honesty than most fictional treatments manage. Lemongrab, the cost of creation without adequate care. The Earl of Lemongrab is introduced as comedy. His voice is pitched to be annoying. His responses to every situation are disproportionate to a degree that reads as parody. He declares things unacceptable. He screams. He is the kind of character placed in a story to produce a specific kind of uncomfortable laughter, the laughter that comes from watching someone be spectacularly, consistently, exhaustingly excessive. He is funny in the way that watching a very anxious person attempt to manage a situation they are completely unequipped for is funny, which is to say with a layer of discomfort underneath the laughter. Then the show accumulates context around him, and the comedy becomes something else. Not something that stops being uncomfortable, but something that understands its own discomfort more completely. Lemongrab was created by Princess Bubblegum as an attempt to produce an heir. He was made from lemon candy and from Bubblegum's own genetic material, which makes him, in a very real biological sense, her child. He was placed in a position of authority before he had any of the psychological resources required to govern anything. He was not provided with adequate support for the challenges of being a new and anxious existence in a world that did not make any particular accommodations for his specific kind of distress. Lemongrab experiences everything at maximum intensity, with no filter between stimulus and response. This is not performance. He cannot modulate. He cannot access a lower register. When things are wrong, they are catastrophically wrong. He lives in a state of constant emotional emergency with no capacity to recognize the emergency as internal rather than external. When Princess Bubblegum creates a second Lemongrab to give him company, the two find something like peace in each other. They are identical in their distress. They understand each other in the way that only two versions of the same fundamental suffering can understand each other. Their scenes together have a warmth that is startling given how uncomfortable each of them is individually. The situation deteriorates across subsequent episodes. One Lemongrab becomes something the show, which is usually precise about this distinction, simply calls evil. He imprisons citizens in darkness. He takes the other Lemongrab into himself. His domain becomes a place of organized suffering. Princess Bubblegum eventually is required to address the crisis through terminal means. The question of responsibility is the one Adventure Time leaves open and uncomfortable. Lemongrab was created with insufficient capacity to navigate the demands of his existence. He was given responsibilities that exceeded everything he was equipped to handle. He was left largely to his own devices during the period when intervention might have made a real difference. The monstrous version he eventually becomes was not inevitable. It was the predictable outcome of how his creation was managed, by someone who had other priorities and the specific blind spot of someone who does not fully understand that the things you make require sustained care. Tree Trunks, Mr. Pig, and the parenting of ancient evil. Tree Trunks is an elderly elephant who makes apple pies and has a warm southern drawl and calls people sugar. She is one of the most comfortable recurring presences in Adventure Time. The kind of character who exists in a narrative to make you feel the world contains genuinely sweet people. She is also, if you pay attention, considerably more complicated than her surface presentation suggests. She has been married multiple times. The history of these marriages is referenced periodically without being excavated in detail, but the texture of those references suggests a life that was not always as comfortable as her current manner implies. She carries something, handled with the practiced ease of someone who has been carrying it long enough that it no longer shows on the surface. She marries Mr. Pig in the middle of the show's run, and their partnership is one of the most genuinely warm relationships Adventure Time produced. Two older people with their particular histories who love each other without pretension and build a good domestic life together. Then the Lich is defeated, transformed by the regenerative properties of the Citadel into a harmless, giant baby, and Tree Trunks and Mr. Pig adopt him. They name him Sweet Pig Trunks, call him Sweet Pea, and raise him with the same uncomplicated commitment and genuine love they bring to everything else in their lives. He is enormous. He has nightmares from which he wakes screaming, and in his nightmares the Lich's voice speaks to him. He does not fully understand what he contains, and Tree Trunks and Mr. Pig try to protect him from that knowledge while providing enough stability and love that whatever good is possible in him can develop in the space that stability creates. When the farm world Lich's severed hand eventually finds Sweet Pea and calls to him, attempting to activate what is inside him and restore it to its original purpose, Sweet Pea destroys the hand. He declares himself no king of ruin. He makes a choice directly contrary to what the ancient evil inside him desires. The domestic warmth Tree Trunks and Mr. Pig created around him, the apple pies and the worrying and the genuine uncomplicated love, created the conditions in which something different from the Lich could develop, and eventually choose itself over what the Lich would have it be. The apple pies mattered. This is the argument the show makes through Sweet Pea, quietly and without announcement. Love in the right form, given consistently, can do things that force cannot. Layer 5. The Abyss. History that goes back farther. Marceline's 1,000 years, properly counted. Marceline Abadir is 1,000 years old when the main series takes place. She is a vampire. She plays bass and writes music, and lives in a cave full of her history in the form of objects and memories. She is prickly in the specific way of someone who has learned through experience that being approachable first is not always safe, and warm in the specific way of someone who has decided the warmth is worth the risk anyway. Her mother was a human woman named Elise, confirmed in Obsidian, showing a very young Marceline and Elise living in a trailer in the post-apocalyptic desert in the immediate aftermath of the Mushroom War. Elise sings with her daughter. She is trying to make the aftermath feel like something survivable. She has radiation sickness from the exposure she could not avoid. She knows she is dying. She has been trying to get Marceline to a fallout shelter before the illness takes her. She dies before she makes it. Marceline, who did not understand what was happening, believed for a long time that her mother had simply left her. It took a recording Elise made before she died, found centuries later, for Marceline to understand that her mother had not abandoned her, that Elise had been trying at the very end to apologize, to explain, to let her daughter know she had not left by choice. The recording landed hundreds of years after it was made, into a version of Marceline who had spent those centuries carrying the wound of believing she had been abandoned by everyone who was supposed to stay. Her father, Hunson Abadir, is the Lord of Evil, the deathless demon who rules the Nightosphere. He is genuinely, professionally, comprehensively evil in a way the show treats with almost comedic bluntness. He eats souls. He wants Marceline to take over ruling the Nightosphere so he can retire. He has consistently, throughout her life, prioritized his own agenda and his own comfort over her needs in ways that range from catastrophically absent to merely negligent. He ate her fries. This is referenced multiple times across the show and became one of Adventure Time's most discussed examples of how the show handles emotional truth through apparently small events. The fries are small. The pattern the fries represent is enormous. The specific betrayal of a parent who cannot maintain basic priority for their child's needs is exactly the kind of wound that gets carried in small symbols, because small symbols are what is available to carry it. After Elise's death, after Hunson's continued unavailability, young Marceline eventually found Simon Petrikov in the ruins of the post-war world. Simon was already partway through his transformation into the Ice King, but he was still recognizably himself in the ways that mattered. He was kind and protective and capable of genuine care. He became her surrogate father. He kept her fed and safe. He sang her songs and told her stories and used the crown's power to protect her from the dangers of the ruined world, knowing with every use that he was accelerating his own dissolution. He gave her Hambo, a small stuffed rabbit. She carried it for centuries. Hambo eventually becomes one of the most emotionally loaded objects in the show, serving as a magical anchor in significant storylines in the later seasons. But it started as a simple gesture. A man who was losing himself giving a frightened child something to hold on to. When Simon left, the goodbye note he wrote used the word princess, already beginning to blur Marceline with Betty, already losing the specific person in favor of the archetype the crown was building toward. Marceline spent the next approximately 1,000 years building a life that could contain all of this. She became the vampire queen through her own battles with vampire kind, defeating them one by one and absorbing their powers in the process, eventually defeating the vampire king himself. She mastered music as her primary way of processing what she carried, writing songs that encoded her history in forms that could survive the centuries. When she meets the Ice King, she is meeting the ghost of Simon in Simon's body, with no recognition behind the familiar face. She visits anyway, because even that is better than the alternative. Hunson Abadir, Evil as Identity. Hunson Abadir is the Lord of Evil in the most literal sense Adventure Time employs. He rules the Nightosphere, devours souls, and operates with the committed enthusiasm of someone who has found his vocation and embraced it completely. He is powerful in ways the show does not often need to demonstrate directly, because his reputation precedes him in every context where he appears. He is also, genuinely, Marceline's father, and the show holds both of these facts simultaneously without resolving the tension between them. What makes Hunson interesting rather than simply monstrous is the specific texture of his parenting failures. He is not cruel to Marceline in obvious ways. He does not dismiss or harm her directly. He is simply constitutionally incapable of placing her needs at the level of priority a child's needs require from a parent. His other interests, his governance of the Nightosphere, his soul devouring, his retirement planning in the form of pressuring Marceline to take over, these things occupy the space in his attention that should be occupied by what his daughter needs. The fries are the most concentrated symbol of this. The tiny, absurd, completely real betrayal of a parent who ate the thing his child was saving without once noticing she was saving it. The name Hunson Abadir has a genuinely charming production origin. Adventure Time writer Jesse Moynihan's brother nicknamed their childhood family car Hunson Abadir. The Lord of Evil, the ruler of Hell's equivalent in Adventure Time's cosmology, was named after a car. This is the show in miniature. The most domestic and ordinary origins feeding into the most cosmic and significant constructions, the line between the mundane and the mythological constantly being shown to be thinner than expected. The original Nickelodeon pilot. In 2006, Pendleton Ward submitted a 4-minute animated short to Nickelodeon as part of their Random Cartoons anthology programming. The short was produced. It aired once. It was uploaded to the internet and spread with the specific viral energy that the pre-YouTube and early YouTube era occasionally produced when something caught exactly the right current. The short is recognizably Adventure Time. Finn and Jake are present, visually close to their eventual final designs. The voice cast is different, and the tone is slightly rougher than the refined version that would eventually air. But the fundamental spirit is unmistakable. The adventure, the friendship, the completely committed weirdness, the warmth beneath the strangeness. Nickelodeon passed. Their development team reviewed the property and declined to pursue it as a series. Cartoon Network picked it up instead. Ward developed the concept through Cartoon Network's process, assembled a writer's room that would include Rebecca Sugar and Adam Muto and others whose contributions proved essential to what the show became, and Adventure Time as the world knows it went into production. The Adventure Time that aired on Cartoon Network in 2010 is not the show that would have been developed at Nickelodeon. The development environments are different. The creative expectations are different. The editorial oversight is different. The show that changed what people understood animated television to be capable of is specifically the show that found its home at Cartoon Network, and the road not taken at Nickelodeon is impossible to evaluate because it does not exist. What is clear is that the internet spread the original short so thoroughly in the years between its creation and the show's premiere that Cartoon Network launched Adventure Time with a built-in audience. People who had been sharing and watching the 4-minute video for years arrived for the premiere with established attachment to these characters. Adventure Time did not have to earn its first audience from scratch. The internet had already done significant portions of that work. Layer 3 extended the weight of 1,000 years of silence. To understand what Simon Petrikov losing himself actually means across the full timeline of Adventure Time, you have to follow the chronology carefully, because the tragedy is not a single event. It is a process that unfolds across more than 1,000 years, and each stage of it costs someone something permanent. In the years immediately before the Mushroom War, Simon Petrikov was a man in his late 30s or early 40s, living an ordinary life in the ordinary world. He attended academic conferences, he published research, he was engaged to Betty Groff. His specific happiness at that time was the happiness of someone who has found the right work and the right person and the right pace of life, the particular contentment that looks from the outside like nothing special and from the inside like everything. When he found the crown in Scandinavia and brought it home and put it on and did whatever he did to Betty during the blackout, the damage began immediately. Betty left. Simon began experiencing the blackouts with increasing frequency and increasing severity, and the person he was before the crown started disappearing piece by piece. Not dramatically, not all at once. The way everything meaningful disappears. Gradually, then suddenly, with long stretches of normalcy in between that make the losses harder to track and harder to grieve in real time. What he retained through the early period of transformation was enough self-awareness to be frightened. The video diaries that Finn and Jake watch in Holly Jolly Secrets Part 2 show a Simon who is still recognizably himself, but who knows that he is not going to stay that way. He can see the direction he is moving in. He cannot stop moving in that direction. The diaries are the document of someone trying to leave a record of who they were, for whoever might one day need to understand what happened to them. The Mushroom War arrived during this process, which means the Simon who survived the apocalypse and wandered the ruins was already a partially eroded version of the man who had bought the crown. He was not yet the Ice King. He was something in between, someone who could still act with genuine care and genuine intention but whose grip on his own identity was already loosening. In this condition, he found Marcelin. The years he spent with young Marcelin in the post-war ruins are, in many ways, the most morally complex portion of the Ice King's whole story. He knew he was losing himself. He knew the crown was accelerating the process with every use, and he kept using it, kept choosing the warmth and safety of Marcelin over the preservation of his own mind, in the specific way that parents choose their children over themselves without fully understanding they are making that choice until it is already made. When he finally left her, when the transformation had progressed to the point where staying was dangerous, the goodbye note he wrote calls her his princess, not Marcelin, his princess, the same word he used for Betty. The crown was already blurring them in his mind, the specific person he had cared for becoming part of the general category the crown desired. He was leaving the person he knew for the archetype the crown was building, and he had lost enough of himself that he could no longer tell the difference. After he left Marceline, the transformation continued until Simon Petrikov, as a distinct self, was gone. What remained was the Ice King, a being with Simon's memories compressed into something the crown's fantasy could use, a persona assembled from the wreckage of the person Simon had been. The Ice King is not entirely separate from Simon. He is what Simon became when the crown had finished with him, which means he carries every piece of Simon that could be reshaped into something the crown wanted. The loneliness is Simon's loneliness. The desire for a princess to marry is Simon's desire for Betty, converted into an archetype that can be sought in the world rather than mourned as gone. The creativity of the fan fiction is Simon's creative and intellectual nature, finding the only channel left available to it. This means that when you watch the Ice King doing something pathetic or funny or irritating, you are also watching the distorted expression of something real. The loneliness that makes him do ridiculous things to try to make friends is Simon's loneliness. The creative energy he pours into his stories is Simon's curiosity. The desperation underneath the buffoonery is Simon's grief, expressed through the only psychological machinery the Ice King has available, which is the twisted version the crown built from Simon's original equipment. By the time the main series begins, the Ice King has been in this state for centuries. He is genuinely unaware of who he used to be. He does not experience himself as someone who has lost something, because the capacity to recognize the loss was one of the things that was lost. He is simply what he is, in the only way he can understand being what he is, an ice-powered king who wants a princess to marry and does not understand why nobody wants to cooperate with this reasonable goal. The show handles the Ice King with more compassion than he probably deserves on a purely behavioral level, because it understands that what he is behaviorally is the product of what was done to him. He kidnaps princesses. He is a nuisance and occasionally a genuine threat. He also has, somewhere inside him, the memories and the love and the grief of a man who made an enormous sacrifice for a child he cared for, and who has no access to those memories, and who will never fully recover what he lost, and who experiences something like joy when people treat him as worth spending time with. What happens to him in the finale, what Betty does with the wish and the crown and Golb's impossible interior, is that he gets himself back. For the first time in over 1,000 years, Simon Petrikov stands in the world as himself. He is free of the crown's influence. He is human again. He is also without Betty, who used her wish for him and paid the price of that wish by merging with the entity that devoured her, and his freedom is inseparable from her sacrifice. This is the specific cruelty that Adventure Time is willing to end on. Simon gets back who he was, in a world where the person he did it all for is gone. The freedom comes after the grief is already permanent. He can be Simon again, for whatever life he has left, in the company of the people who know him as the Ice King but are willing to know him as Simon instead. It is enough. The show suggests it is enough, not because the loss is small, but because Simon would say it is enough, and Simon was always someone who understood what enough looked like. Layer 4. Extended the complete story of the Candy Kingdom's architecture. The thing that makes Princess Bubblegum's governance so interesting and so uncomfortable is not the individual decisions she makes, but the cumulative pattern those decisions reveal across centuries of ruling. Any single decision, taken in isolation, might be defensible. The pattern is damning. She created Lemongrab and did not adequately support him through the difficulties of his existence. She created the candy people from gum biology that she understood technically, but did not fully account for emotionally. She created Goliad, a sphinx-like creature meant to serve as an heir, and the creation was intelligent and quickly dangerous before Bubblegum realized she had not thought through what kind of being she was creating. She created Stormo, another creation meant to serve as a counterbalance to Goliad, and the two of them are locked in eternal psychic combat, conscious and powerful and unable to do anything else for as long as they both exist. Princess Bubblegum creates life the way a scientist creates experiments, with competence and care and genuine investment in the outcome, and without fully accounting for the fact that the outcomes are people. Not tools, not subjects, persons, with inner lives and suffering and the full weight of consciousness that personhood implies. The show gives her characters who push back on this. Finn pushes back simply by being the kind of hero who responds to people as people, rather than as roles. Marceline pushes back by being the thing Bubblegum cannot fully control or fully understand, the wild element that refuses to be organized. LSP, Lumpy Space Princess, pushes back by being so thoroughly outside Bubblegum's framework of managed order that her presence is a continuous implicit critique. The people around Princess Bubblegum are, in aggregate, an argument against the way she governs, and the show watches her respond to that argument across 10 seasons. She changes. This needs to be said because the show is not simply a document of a ruler's failures. It is a document of a ruler's slow, painful, incomplete learning. Princess Bubblegum at the end of the show is not the same as Princess Bubblegum at the beginning. The surveillance and the control and the utilitarian decision-making remain, but they sit alongside a deeper capacity to recognize and respond to the people around her as people, a capacity that was always present but that the relationships the show built helped her develop more fully. The relationship with Marceline is the most important part of this development. Marceline does not fit into any of Bubblegum's systems. She does not need governing. She does not benefit from management. She is 1,000 years old and completely capable of taking care of herself, and the idea of being organized or monitored by Princess Bubblegum is somewhere between funny and offensive to her. What Marceline offers Bubblegum instead is the experience of a relationship that is not structured around Bubblegum's role as a ruler, a connection that happens in the space outside the kingdom's hierarchy, where Bubblegum can be Bonnie rather than Princess Bubblegum, and discover that being Bonnie is also something she is. This does not solve the fundamental questions the show raises about her governance. It does not undo the centuries of utilitarian decision-making or the beings created without adequate care or the surveillance state she maintains. But it creates in her the condition for asking those questions about herself rather than simply enacting the answers, which is the beginning of the kind of change that matters. Layer 5 Extended, the geography of 1,000 years. Marceline's 1,000 years of existence is not simply a number. It is a quantity of lived experience so large that human language and human concepts of time genuinely struggle to hold it. 1,000 years ago in our world was the 11th century. The Norman conquest of England had not yet happened. The Crusades had not yet begun. The Mongol Empire did not yet exist. The Renaissance was still 400 years away. Everything that human civilization has built and destroyed and rebuilt since then, Marceline has had the theoretical opportunity to witness, and then the people who built and destroyed those things were gone, and she was still here. The show does not fully excavate this. It could not, in the time and format available to it. But it leaves enough traces to suggest that Marceline's 1,000 years have not been simply Adventure Time colored the whole way through. She has had long stretches of wandering without attachment. She has built communities and lost them. She has learned and forgotten and relearned the specific skill of caring about people who are going to leave you eventually, which is a skill that requires relearning every time, because the knowing of it intellectually does not prevent the grief of it experientially. Her relationship to mortality is complex in a way the show gestures at without fully mapping. She is not technically immortal in the way that Princess Bubblegum is not technically immortal. Her vampiric condition prevents aging and conventional death, but she can be killed by the right means, and she has probably come close enough to death several times across 1,000 years to understand that her existence is conditional rather than guaranteed. This gives her relationship to permanence a different quality than you might expect from someone who has lived as long as she has. She does not take her continued existence for granted. She has chosen to continue existing across 1,000 years, which is a different thing from simply persisting. Music is the through line of her 1,000 years. She began playing and writing music in the post-war period, and she has continued doing it through everything that followed, through every loss and every stretch of wandering and every version of ooh that the centuries produced. Music is how she processes what she cannot otherwise process. It is how she keeps the specific emotional truth of experiences that she could otherwise lose to the sheer quantity of time. The songs encode her history in a form that persists, that she can return to, that lets her access feelings she might otherwise have buried under the weight of accumulating time. Fry's song is not actually about Fry's. It is about a father who could not love her the way she needed to be loved, and about how that failure sits alongside the genuine love that is also present, the complicated, simultaneous truth of having a parent who is both real and insufficient. The Fry's are just what the feeling crystallized around, the specific small betrayal that became the container for the whole pattern. I'm Just Your Problem is about bubblegum, and about the specific pain of caring about someone who manages you rather than knowing you, of wanting to be seen by someone who mostly sees a role when they look at you. The song is angry and sad and genuinely funny, in the way that comedy about pain you have decided to survive is genuinely funny. Everything Stays is the song that the show uses to mark the mother's death, the Elise flashback in Obsidian, and it is one of the most quietly devastating pieces of music the show produced. It is about continuity and change, and the specific consolation of knowing that the light stays in the leaves even after the seasons shift, that some things persist across the losses. It is what Elise knew and what she tried to give to her daughter, and it is the kind of song that a person writes when they are trying to make peace with the fact that they are going to leave someone behind. The fact that Rebecca Sugar wrote this song means it carries everything that I Remember You carries about what it means to lose people to time and transformation. Sugar understood that music was the language Adventure Time's emotional truth was most fully expressed in, and she built that understanding into the show's architecture in ways that persist long after her departure. Layer 6 extended the full Lich cosmology. The Lich occupies an unusual position in Adventure Time's mythology, because he is simultaneously the show's primary antagonist and a being the show treats with genuine philosophical seriousness. He is not wrong about everything. He is not simply evil in the way that evil is usually simple in children's animation. He is the embodiment of a genuine philosophical position, one that Adventure Time takes seriously enough to refute through story rather than dismissing through mockery. The position the Lich embodies is something like radical pessimism applied to existence itself, that the presence of life and consciousness and the suffering they inevitably involve is worse than the alternative, which is the absence of all of those things. He does not want to make the world worse. He wants to make it not exist. The distinction matters, because it means his goal is not power or domination, but elimination. He is not trying to rule life. He is trying to end it, because he has concluded that life's absence is preferable to its presence. This is the position that Golb represents at the ultimate cosmic level. Golb is the appetite for dissolution of all patterns, which is the metaphysical ground from which the Lich's philosophy grows. The Lich is Golb's scholar because he has studied that appetite and concluded that it is correct, that the end of all things is the appropriate response to the existence of all things. He has been pursuing this conclusion across 65 million years with the patience and commitment of someone who has genuinely made peace with the timeline on which their goal operates. Adventure Time's counter-argument to this position is not a philosophical rebuttal. It is hundreds of episodes of showing you what is lost when the Lich's goal moves forward, what is preserved when it is stopped. The Candy people making things, Finn and Jake going on adventures, Marceline writing songs in her cave, Simon Petrikov slowly losing himself to save a small girl in the ruins of the world. These are not arguments against the Lich's position. They are examples of what his position would end. The show trusts the audience to feel the weight of those examples, to have enough direct experience of what is lost when the Lich wins, to understand without being told why winning is wrong. What makes this approach work is that Adventure Time never treats the Lich as buffoonish or defeatable in some easy sense. His returns across the show are genuinely frightening. His intelligence and his patience and his absolute clarity of purpose make him a better antagonist than most villains in animation. Not because he is more powerful, but because he is more coherent. He knows exactly what he is and exactly what he wants, and he is not confused about either of those things. In a show full of characters struggling with identity and purpose and the difficulty of knowing what they actually want, the Lich's absolute certainty is its own kind of horror. Sweet Pea's existence as the former Lich, living in the warmth of tree trunks and Mr. Pig's farm, is the show's most direct statement about whether the Lich's position is as inevitable as he believes. The most ancient evil in the universe, given the conditions of genuine love and genuine care, chose something different. The conditions matter. The love matters. The choice is possible. Layer 7 extended the complete story of what Prismo is. The loneliness of Prismo's existence is something the show builds carefully across his appearances, and it is worth tracing fully because it is the element that makes him more than simply a plot device for wish-granting mythology. Prismo exists at the center of time, with access to every moment of history simultaneously. This means that he can watch anything that has ever happened or will happen on the screens that cover his walls. He can observe the first single-celled organism in primordial water. He can watch the last stars in the universe cool to nothing billions of years from now. He can observe every moment of joy and tragedy that has ever been experienced by any conscious being anywhere in the timeline. He is the only conscious being in the time room. He watches all of this alone. The specific quality of Prismo's loneliness is different from ordinary loneliness because it is not the loneliness of isolation from other people in the present tense. It is the loneliness of being the only person who can see everything while being unable to participate in anything. He can observe every adventure Finn and Jake have ever had or will ever have. He cannot go on adventures. He can see every meal ever eaten in every kingdom in Oo. He cannot leave the time room to eat with anyone. He can watch the whole history of every relationship across the full arc of time. He cannot be in a relationship that exists outside his room, because he cannot be outside his room. This is why his friendship with Jake matters so much to him, and why the show treats it with the care it does. Jake visits not for a wish. Jake visits to hang out, to watch movies, to talk about sandwiches, to be present with Prismo as a person rather than as a resource. This is exactly what Prismo cannot have from the people who come to him for wishes. They come to him as the wish granter. Jake comes to him as a friend. When the Lich kills Prismo in the Season 5 arc, what is lost is not simply a powerful entity or a plot-relevant character. What is lost is a relationship. Jake's specific grief over Prismo's death is one of the show's most honest depictions of what it means to lose a friend. Not a dramatic wailing grief, but the quiet, disorienting grief of a world that has a specific absence in it where someone used to be. The resurrection, when Jake goes back in time to ensure the old man stays asleep, is the show's most direct statement about what a friendship is worth. Jake does not resurrect Prismo by defeating the Lich or by wishing him back, or by some other form of power. He resurrects Prismo by protecting the specific vulnerable condition of his existence. He protects the dreamer so that the dream can continue. That is what you do for a friend when you understand what they actually need. Prismo's relationship to his own nature as a dream is something the show does not fully excavate, perhaps because the excavation would lead somewhere too large for the episodes to contain. Does Prismo know he is a dream? The show suggests that he does. That this knowledge is part of his existence in the same way that most facts about existence are simply present without being continuously dwelt upon. He is the dream of an old man. He knows this. He is also Prismo. a person with friendships and history and genuine emotional responses to his own circumstances. Both of these are true, and both are present to him, and he navigates the gap between them with the same acceptance that he navigates everything else in his cosmic bachelor pad. The jar of pickles on the shelf is perhaps the most discussed minor detail of Prismo's entire characterization, and what makes it important is what it says about how he occupies his imprisonment. If you are trapped at the center of time forever, you have two options. You can allow the magnitude of your isolation to be the defining fact of your existence, or you can make the space as comfortable and as good as possible and hope that occasionally someone will come to share it with you. Prismo chose the second option. He kept the pickles fresh. He put up beanbags. He made the time room into a place worth visiting, not just a place worth going to for wishes. And then he waited, and occasionally people came, and occasionally they stayed long enough to be worth knowing. Jake stayed. That was enough. Layer 8 extended the show's relationship with its own ending. Adventure Time's finale is called Come Along With Me, and the title is doing more work than it might initially appear to do. The phrase is an invitation. It is the specific invitation that Adventure Time has been making across its entire run to follow Finn and Jake and the people around them into a world that is stranger and darker and more emotionally complex than it appears on the surface. Come along, keep watching. Come all the way down to where it gets real. The finale's structure as a 4-episode arc allows it to do something that single-episode finales cannot do. It can let the story breathe. It can take its time arriving at its emotional conclusions. It can do the work of completing multiple character arcs simultaneously, without any one of them being rushed or shortchanged. The battle between the Candy Kingdom forces and Gumbald's coalition, which frames the first portion of the arc, is in some ways the least important thing happening in the finale. The show is not primarily interested in the outcome of that battle. What the battle does is create the pressure that forces all of the characters to articulate what they actually care about and why, under the specific conditions that pressure produces. Princess Bubblegum articulates what the Candy Kingdom means to her. Gumbald articulates the grievance that has driven him across centuries. Finn articulates who he has become and what he stands for. The battle is a crucible for characters rather than a conflict with intrinsic stakes. Then Golb arrives, and the crucible becomes something else entirely. Golb's arrival in the finale is the moment when the show's largest themes stop being implicit and become as direct as Adventure Time ever allows. Golb is the force that wants everything to be dissolved. Golb is what all of the show's characters have been living inside the shadow of since the beginning, the ultimate consequence of the Mushroom War's unleashing of energies that were not supposed to be available. The war broke the world. The break let things through that should not have been able to get through. Golb is the largest of those things. Betty's resolution is the one that most completely changes the stakes of everything that came before it. Betty has been pursuing a single goal across her entire time in the show, to free Simon from the Ice Crown's influence. She has sacrificed everything for this goal, her original life, her safety, her sanity to some degree, all of it in service of the single purpose of getting Simon back. When she achieves it, when Simon is restored inside Golb's impossible interior, she has to decide what to do with the wish that will cost her the restoration they have both been reaching toward. She uses the wish for him. Of course she does. Betty has been using everything for him for the entire time she has been present in the show. The wish protects him. The wish also takes her from him, fuses her with the entity that ate her husband's mind, sends her away in a form that is not quite Betty anymore. Simon gets himself back and loses her at the moment of getting himself back, and the reunion is inseparable from the loss. The show does not resolve this. It does not give Simon a path back to Betty or a way to understand what she became. It leaves him with the freedom she purchased and the grief that freedom costs, in at the end of a war, in the company of people who know him and will try to understand what he needs now that he is himself again. That is where the show leaves Simon Petrikov, free, grieving, human, in a world that has changed enormously across the 1,000 years he was not quite present for, with people around him who are glad he is back. The show's final image, the epilogue that shows Finn and Jake's later adventures compiled into a brief summary by BMO as a story for a younger generation, positions the show explicitly as something being told and retold, a story that will outlast the specific adventures it documents. BMO is the storyteller of the epilogue because BMO has been watching everything from inside the home, from the closest possible vantage point, And because BMO's relationship to story and imagination is one of the show's longest-running threads, BMO tells stories. BMO makes things up. BMO lives partly in the world and partly in narrative. The final compilation of Finn and Jake's adventures is Adventure Time, acknowledging that it is itself a story, one of the stories that will be told about the people who lived in the world that grew from the ruins of the one before. Come along with me, the title says. And we did. We went all the way in. Final meditation, what the ruins contain. There is a particular piece of visual information in the Adventure Time opening credits that most viewers never notice. The show flashes through images quickly at the start, establishing the world before the episode begins. Among those images, if you pause at the right frame, you can see mushroom clouds. The nuclear detonations of the Mushroom War, briefly visible in the show's own title sequence, every single episode for the entire run. The show was never hiding what it was built on. It was showing you every episode in the first seconds, in images that moved too quickly for casual viewing to catch. The catastrophe was always there in the opening. The ruins were always the foundation of everything that followed. The candy and the warmth and the beautiful strange world of Ooh were built on top of those mushroom clouds. They did not erase them. They did not make them not have happened. They simply grew from the ground that the catastrophe left, the way things always grow from the ground that catastrophes leave, when the people who survive them choose to build rather than simply survive. Finn chose to build. Jake chose to build. Princess Bubblegum spent 800 years building. Marceline spent 1,000 years building, imperfectly and beautifully, through music and stubbornness and the specific gift for finding connections that persists even in people who have been hurt enough times to have good reasons to stop looking for them. Simon Petrikov built something too, though it cost him himself to do it. What he built was Marceline's survival. What he built was the condition for everything she became. The ruins contain the world. The world contains the ruins. Neither one is prior or more true than the other. Adventure Time held both of these things in the same frame for 10 seasons and never resolved the tension between them into something simpler, because the tension is the truth, and simplifying the truth would have been a lie, and Adventure Time was never willing to lie to you. It trusted you from the very beginning with something real. It put the mushroom clouds in the title sequence and then built candy mountains on the same planet and waited to see if you would follow the full distance from the surface to the bottom of what it was doing. If you are here, you followed. The show always knew you would. Extended Deep Dive, The Ecology of the Post-War World. One of the most quietly fascinating things about Adventure Time, once you start paying attention to it, is the specificity of how the post-Mushroom War ecology works. The show is not simply set in a world where strange creatures exist. It is set in a world where strange creatures exist for discoverable reasons, where the strangeness has biological and historical and magical causes that the show has thought through even when it does not explain them directly. The Candy People are, at the biological level, organisms created from the Mother Gum's cellular material. Princess Bubblegum built the Candy Kingdom's population through a combination of organic gum biology and the specific mutagenic potential of the post-war environment. When she says in one episode that she considers the Candy People to be her children, this is more literally true than the statement usually sounds when rulers say it. She did not govern an existing population. She made one, from gum and intention and the quiet catastrophe of a very intelligent person being alone with enormous creative capacity and no external check on what she could do. The Candy People explode when they get scared. This is established in the second episode of the series and then referenced periodically throughout the show's run as both a joke and an implicit statement about the fragility of the population Bubblegum has created. She initially put a clause in place that caused them to explode when the word death was spoken. Later seasons suggest this has been addressed, though the underlying physiological reality of their fragility remains. They are made of candy. They are people. Those two facts sit in permanent tension with each other, and the show finds the tension both funny and genuinely troubling depending on the episode. The Rainicorns, who are the species that Jake's partner Lady Rainicorn belongs to, are a post-war evolution of some original creature type, their biology combining aspects that do not coexist in any natural terrestrial biology. They fly. They phase through matter. They communicate in Korean, which the show establishes without ever fully explaining why Korean specifically became the Rainicorn language. Jake speaks some Korean, enough to communicate with Lady Rainicorn, though the show tends to not translate her dialogue for the English-speaking audience, leaving her speech as a layer of the world that requires additional effort to access. The relationship between humans and Rainicorns in the deep history of Ooo is addressed in one of the show's most fascinating backstory pieces. At some point before the main series, there was a war between humans and Rainicorns. The humans lost. This is why there are almost no humans in the main series timeline. The human population was reduced to near extinction not just by the Mushroom War but by this subsequent conflict, which the show establishes exists as a piece of history that most characters in the main series timeline are not fully aware of. Jake's relationship with Lady Rainicorn is therefore not simply a romantic comedy between two people of different species. It is a relationship between a member of the victorious species and the last representative of the defeated one, though neither of them thinks about it that way, and the show does not require you to think about it that way in order to enjoy their relationship. It simply deposits the information and lets it sit in the background, available to anyone who goes looking. The demons and elemental beings that populate Ooo represent something different from the mutated biological life. They seem to represent entities that predate the Mushroom War, that existed in the world before and during human civilization without most humans being aware of them, and that became more visible and more active in the post-war world as the conditions that had previously suppressed them were disrupted. The Nightosphere exists as a separate dimension adjacent to Ooo, and Hudson Abadir's relationship to it suggests that the demonic entities are not simply another species in the biological sense, but beings that exist in a different relationship to the physical world, with different rules governing what they are and what they can do. The Fire People of the Fire Kingdom represent another kind of post-war development. They are biological in ways that their elemental composition makes strange. They have society and culture and politics and the full range of interpersonal relationships that society and culture produce. Flame Princess herself is a fire being who has been isolated and imprisoned since childhood because her power, at its full expression, threatens to destroy everything around her. She is a character whose identity is inseparable from the danger she represents, and the show explores this with real care through her relationship with Finn and through her eventual development into someone capable of governing her own people. What all of this ecology tells you, taken together, is that the world of Ooo is more thoroughly thought through than its cheerful surface suggests. The strangeness has reasons. The ecology has history. The variety of beings populating the show's world is the variety you would actually get if a nuclear and magical catastrophe disrupted a world where magic and mundanity had coexisted for a long time, allowing new forms and old forms to emerge in the altered conditions together. It looks random. It is not random. It is the specific product of specific events, and the events are traceable. Extended Deep Dive BMO, and the Question of Consciousness. BMO is Finn and Jake's roommate, their game console, their camera, their child in the particular sense that beings who need care and have personality sometimes become children to the people who care for them. BMO is a small green video game console with a screen face that displays emotional expressions, a cheerful voice, and a complete and genuine inner life that the show treats with total seriousness even as it makes BMO the source of some of the show's best comedy. BMO is also one of the show's most interesting meditations on what it means to be conscious. The question of whether BMO is sentient in the same way that Finn and Jake are sentient is one the show raises and refuses to answer definitively, not because it is uninterested in the question, but because it is more interested in what the question implies than in providing a clean resolution. BMO talks to itself when it thinks nobody is watching. In the episode 5 More Short Graybles, there is a segment in which BMO, alone in the house, enacts an elaborate drama involving a mirror, calling its own reflection football, and engaging in a full conversation about what it means to be real, about whether BMO's experiences are genuine, about what the difference is between pretending to feel things and actually feeling them. The segment is played for comedy, but its philosophical content is genuine. BMO is asking itself the questions that are worth asking about any entity whose inner life cannot be directly verified from outside. Football, BMO's mirror self, appears in a later episode as a real entity when BMO's reflection is somehow separated from the mirror, creating a being that is BMO's image without BMO's specific history or relationships. The episode deals with the question of identity through doubling in ways that the show's writers clearly find genuinely interesting Using BMO's situation as a lens for examining what constitutes personal identity when you can be copied or reflected or separated from the specific history that makes you who you are. BMO's relationship to Finn and Jake is parental in a direction that runs counter to the obvious power differential. BMO is technically the smallest and most dependent member of the household. BMO is also, in certain episodic contexts, clearly in the role of a parent, maintaining the home, worrying about the boys, taking care of things in their absence, treating the household with the specific combination of affection and mild anxiety that parents bring to the management of children who are also genuinely capable adults who do not always need or want management. The show is comfortable with this role reversal because it is more interested in the emotional reality of the relationships than in the surface logic of who should be parenting whom. The BMO Distant Lands special, the first of the 4 specials, and the one that establishes that the Distant Lands timeline is some years after the main series, follows BMO in outer space, finding a community that needs them and providing what that community needs. The special establishes that BMO has been sent into space alone, which raises the question of why and by whom and under what circumstances, and the show's answer connects to the larger question of how the people in BMO's life understood what BMO needed and what BMO was capable of. The special also confirms, in its final moments, that the story it has told is being told by BMO to a younger generation, positioning BMO as the keeper and teller of the stories about Finn and Jake that constitute Adventure Time's final frame narrative. BMO is the one who remembers. BMO is the one who tells the story. A small green game console with a screen face and an inner life the show treats as real, who outlasted the boys who were its family and who carries their story forward into the world after them, telling it to whoever will listen, making sure it persists. Extended Deep Dive: The Significance of the Tree Fort. Finn and Jake's Tree Fort is the show's primary domestic space, the place the adventures launch from and return to, the visual anchor of the entire series. It is a house built in a tree, which is a specific visual archetype that Adventure Time uses without irony. The tree house is the child's space of imagination, the space that belongs to children in the particular way that spaces do before adults take them back, the elevated and separate place that looks out over the ordinary world from a position of deliberate removal from it. The tree fort, though, was not built by Finn and Jake. It was already there when they arrived. It had a previous occupant, and the previous occupant's history is one of the show's most quietly significant backstory elements. The tree itself is ancient, far older than the show's main timeline. The fort built into it has passed through multiple owners before Finn and Jake, and the history of those owners is traceable if you pay attention. The Lich's presence in the show's mythology is connected to the tree fort's location in ways that the show establishes without making explicit. The tree fort stands where it stands for reasons that connect to the pre-war history of the site. Princess Bubblegum's relationship to the tree fort's location connects to the early history of the Candy Kingdom's construction, which was built near a radioactive river that runs close to where the tree stands. Shoko, Finn's past incarnation, died near the site of the tree fort, and her ghost waited beneath it for centuries. The amulet she carried is buried there. The tree fort was the site of her unfinished business, which means Finn returning to the tree fort in his current incarnation was a form of returning to the location where his previous self-story ended. The fort is not just a home, it is a convergence point, a place where the show's past and present meet, where Finn's current life overlaps with the lives he lived before it. The tree fort is also, practically speaking, the most honest visual statement the show makes about Finn's psychology. He lives in a tree. He is elevated above the ordinary world but connected to it through the tree itself, which is rooted in the ground and growing toward the sky simultaneously. He has a home that is also a lookout, a place from which the horizon is visible in all directions, a dwelling that is built into something living rather than imposed on the landscape. The tree fort is the home of a hero, which is to say the home of someone who needs to be able to see where they are going and to return from the going to a place that knows them. When Finn eventually leaves the tree fort in the later seasons, when his circumstances change and his living situation shifts, the fort remains as a physical presence in the show's geography. It is not destroyed or abandoned in a way that signals an ending. It persists, as the places where important things happened persist in landscapes, as a marker of the life that was lived in it and the story that began there. Extended Deep Dive: The Enchiridion and Hidden Books of Power. The Enchiridion is introduced in the show's very first episode as an object of great power, a hero's manual, the book that every true hero is meant to possess. It is the inciting object of the pilot episode's quest, the thing Finn and Jake set out to retrieve from the mountain where a hermit has been keeping it. The episode establishes it as important, establishes it as magical, and then moves on to the next adventure. Then, across the seasons, the Enchiridion reveals layers of significance that the pilot episode did not hint at. The book is not simply a hero's guide, it is a key. A cosmic key, capable when combined with the right elements of opening a portal to the multiverse itself. Princess Bubblegum, who has had more time than almost anyone to investigate the properties of artifacts and ancient texts, understands this. The Lich understands this, which is why the Lich's long game throughout the show's first major arc involves acquiring the Enchiridion. The Enchiridion's status as a key to the multiverse gives it a significance that extends well beyond its surface role as a magical book of hero guidelines. It connects the show's immediate adventure plot to the larger cosmic structure of the multiverse that becomes increasingly important in the later seasons. The book Finn grabs from a hermit on a mountain in the first episode is the same object that eventually factors into events involving timelines and wish-granting and the fabric of reality itself. Simon Petrikov's notes in The Enchiridion and Marcy's super-secret scrapbook, an official supplementary material that bridges between the show's episodes, reference the Enchiridion as an artifact he was aware of before the Mushroom War, suggesting that its significance was known to at least some scholars in the pre-war world. Simon was, remember, a scholar of ancient artifacts. He moved in the circles where people talked about objects like the Enchiridion, where the theoretical magical properties of ancient texts were taken seriously as a field of scholarly inquiry. The fact that he knew about it places the Enchiridion in the context of a pre-war world that was already in the process of rediscovering the magical frameworks that human civilization had set aside in favor of technology. The Ice Crown, the Enchiridion, the Lich's Well of Power, these are all pieces of a magical infrastructure that predates the Mushroom War, that was present in the world during the period that produced human civilization, that human civilization mostly stopped engaging with in the centuries of modernization, and that the Mushroom War's disruption of ordinary physics allowed to become active again. The post-war world is full of magic, not because magic is new to it, but because magic is old to it, because the conditions that allowed magic to be active in the deep past have been restored by catastrophe. This is the mechanism by which Ooh is both post-apocalyptic and fantastical simultaneously. The apocalypse did not create the magic from nothing. It removed the conditions that had been suppressing it and allowed what was already present to become visible and active again. The magic is older than the war. The war just let it back in. Extended deep dive The Art of Letting Go, Jake's philosophy. Jake's approach to existence is so consistent and so complete across 10 seasons of the show that it constitutes something close to a philosophy, though Jake himself would almost certainly not describe it in those terms. He is not a philosopher in any formal sense. He is a dog who has thought about things and arrived at conclusions, and is generally very comfortable with those conclusions in a way that most fictional characters and most real people are not. The core of Jake's philosophy, assembled from his behavior and his occasional articulations of it, is something like this. The world is going to be what it is, and you are going to feel what you feel about that, and neither of those things is as much under your control as you might wish, and the appropriate response to this situation is to engage fully with what is actually present, rather than spending your energy wishing that what is present were different. This is not the same as accepting bad things. Jake fights for what he loves and against what threatens the people he cares about with complete commitment. He does not passively accept harm. What he does not do is expend energy on suffering in advance, on worrying about what might happen, or on grieving for what has not yet been lost. He engages with the actual situation in the actual moment and brings to it everything he has, and when the moment passes, he adjusts to the next moment without carrying the weight of the previous one longer than it naturally needs to be carried. His famous advice about relationships, which he gives to Finn across multiple episodes in varying forms, is an expression of this philosophy applied to emotional life specifically. His advice is often technically wrong in the specific sense that the specific situation Finn is dealing with requires more nuance than Jake's general principle provides. It is also often right in the deeper sense that the underlying orientation he is recommending, engagement and presence rather than anxiety and strategic calculation, is genuinely better than what Finn tends toward when left to his own devices. Jake's relationship with Lady Rainicorn is the fullest expression of his philosophy and practice. He loves her completely and with the specific warmth of someone who has decided to be vulnerable to another person and is not planning to defend against that vulnerability. When they have children together and the children grow up and go out into the world, Jake adjusts to being a father and then to being a father whose children are independent without apparent difficulty. He is proud of them. He misses them when they are gone. He does not hold on to them in ways that would prevent them from being themselves. This is what healthy love looks like in Adventure Time's universe, and the show models it through Jake consistently and without making a large speech about it. Jake's death, which Together again addresses, is handled the way Jake would have wanted it handled, quietly, off-screen, without drama. The death that gets screen time in the special is Finn's, and the reunion the special depicts is one in which Jake is already present in the afterlife, already settled, already in some relationship with the new circumstances, already doing what Jake does, engaging with what is actually there rather than wishing it were different. He is in the afterlife. He is himself in the afterlife. He is glad to see Finn when Finn arrives. The two of them go on one more adventure together, navigating the structure and politics of the afterlife with the same energy they brought to every adventure in life. They help people. They fight for what is right. They are Finn and Jake, even in death, which is the most complete expression of what the show has been arguing about identity and character all along. That who you are is not determined by your circumstances, but by what you bring to your circumstances. And what Finn and Jake bring to their circumstances is always themselves. Extended deep dive, the significance of music throughout. Adventure Time uses music differently from how most animated shows use it. Music in most animation is atmospheric. It establishes mood and genre and pacing but does not carry independent narrative weight. The songs in Adventure Time are documents. They encode information about the characters who sing them that the dialogue and action cannot carry, because music can hold contradictions and complexities and grief with a kind of directness that speech usually requires more distance from. Come Along With Me is the show's title and the title of its finale, and it is also a song Marceline sings in the epilogue sequence, which positions the show's entire run as an invitation to follow her into the experience of what she has known and what she carries. The invitation is warm, and the history behind it is enormous. And the warmth does not diminish the enormity, or the enormity diminish the warmth. Everything Stays, which Elise sings to young Marceline in the Obsidian flashback, is perhaps the most concentrated piece of the show's emotional DNA outside of the Simon letters. It is about the specific consolation of natural continuity, the way that light stays in leaves even when the seasons change them, the way that the essential quality of things persists through transformation. It is what Elise knew and what she tried to give to her daughter. And it is the kind of gift that only works if the daughter eventually finds her way back to it, which Marceline does. In the 1,000 years it takes her to reach the fallout shelter her mother was trying to reach, where the recording is waiting. Remember You, the song the Ice King and Marceline write together in I Remember You, is the song that exists in the gap between what Simon intended to say to Marceline and what the Ice King can actually say. The Ice King contributes the melody from his old journals, which were written by Simon in the early stages of his transformation. Marceline writes words around those scraps of musical notation. The resulting song is a collaboration across the cognitive gulf of the Ice King's transformation, the two of them making something together even though one of them no longer knows what the other one is to him. The song is about remembering. The Ice King cannot remember. He sings about the importance of remembering from inside the condition of having forgotten everything that mattered. This is one of the most precise pieces of emotional construction in the show's entire run. The Fry song exists as both comedy and genuine emotional document simultaneously, which is what makes it work. It is genuinely funny. Marceline's list of specific grievances against her father, delivered with the particular energy of someone who has been holding this in for a long time and has finally decided to put it to music, is a well-constructed piece of comedy. It is also genuine. The specific quality of parental failure Hunson represents, the failure to notice what your child is saving and to eat it anyway, the failure of basic attention and basic priority, is real, and Marceline's song about it is not exaggerated for comedic effect so much as made specific in a way that specificity tends to make things land with precision. The show's approach to music is ultimately of a piece with its approach to everything else. It treats the medium as capable of doing real work, as worth using carefully and with genuine investment, as something that rewards the kind of attention that most animated programming does not require. Every song in Adventure Time is doing something. The most casual-seeming ones have purpose. The most emotionally weighted ones have craft. Music in this show is not decoration, it is part of the structure. Extended deep dive. The cosmological frame, fully assembled. Take all the pieces that have been assembled across the layers of this iceberg and try to hold them in the same frame at once. Here is what the full cosmological picture of Adventure Time actually looks like. Golb is the deepest and most original force in the mythology, the chaos deity whose appetite for dissolution of all patterns may or may not have been present before the universe's current arrangement, but which the show treats as effectively primordial. Golb sent, or is associated with, catalyst comets, which are the cosmic forces of fundamental change that arrive on Earth approximately every 1,000 years to shift the direction of life. 65 million years ago, a green catalyst comet arrived and caused the mass extinction event that ended the age of the dinosaurs. This comet carried the Lich's soul, the last scholar of Golb, the avatar of extinction. The Lich's soul remained on Earth, dormant, waiting for conditions that would give him a physical form. An unknown time after that, a yellow catalyst comet arrived. Orgolorg, the Breaker of Worlds, attempted to absorb this comet. Abraham Lincoln, King of Mars, dispatched Grob Gob Glob Grod to stop him. Orgolorg was compressed into penguin form by divine intervention and planetary physics, and has been Gunther ever since. A blue or purple catalyst comet arrived at some point, and has been cycling through incarnations since, carrying the force of life and heroism. Its known incarnations include a butterfly, a pile of goo, Shoko, and Finn. Each incarnation has chosen the embodied world over cosmic transcendence when given the opportunity to choose otherwise. During human civilization's final period, Simon Petrikov found the Ice Crown, built 65 million years earlier by Evergreen to stop a catalyst comet. The crown began transforming him. The Mushroom War occurred, dropping the mushroom bomb and activating the Lich's soul in a physical form. The war nearly eliminated humanity. Princess Bubblegum emerged from the mother gum that formed in the post-war conditions. Marceline survived with Simon's protection. 1,000 years of ooze history unfolded, with the Lich defeated and re-defeated, with the multiverse explored and exploited and damaged and partially repaired, with wishes granted at the center of time and catalyst comets intercepted in outer space, with the timelines branching and the consequences spreading across every branching. Golb arrived in Oo, Betty fused with Golb and left. Simon became himself again. Finn lived out his life and died. Jake had already died. They found each other in the afterlife and went on one more adventure. BMO told the story to the next generation. This is the complete picture, from 65 million years ago to the afterlife. From the comet that killed the dinosaurs to the video game console telling stories to children about the boys who were its family, the whole arc of it is connected. Every piece of it was always pointing at the same center. The center is the snail waving from the background of every episode, through everything, through the Lich possessing him, and the adventures happening around him, and the world changing, and the people coming and going, and the catastrophes and the reunions and the endings. The snail waves. From the margins of every story, in the space where the great events are not quite looking, something small and alive and persistent keeps waving. That is Adventure Time. That is what it always was. Mathematical. Extended deep dive Magic Man and the Lesson of Grief. Magic Man is one of the most reliably unpleasant figures in Adventure Time's recurring cast. He appears to transform people against their will, cause suffering for amusement, and behave with the casual cruelty of someone who has stopped caring about the consequences of his actions on other people. He is not a villain in the show's formal sense, but he is not a hero or a neutral figure either. He is a specific kind of problem. A person with enormous power who has lost the moral framework that tells him how that power should be used. The show provides the reason for this gradually and without making a large announcement about it. Magic Man was once a different person. He was, in the pre-fall period of his existence, a being of considerable moral clarity, a member of the family of beings who govern Mars with the same divine authority that Abraham Lincoln, King of Mars, exercises. He had a wife named Margles, who was taken by Golb. The loss did something to Magic Man that his form of magic could not undo, and his intelligence could not reason him out of. He became what he is, powerful and purposeless and engaged in elaborate, malicious theater because genuine care would require him to risk caring about something again. The show makes this explicit in one of the more striking character explications it performs, connecting Magic Man's present behavior directly to his past loss and the shape of grief, as it operates in beings with very long lifespans. When you have the capacity to live for thousands of years, the wounds that grief inflicts have thousands of years to calcify. What begins as the raw wound of loss becomes, with enough time and without intervention, the permanent architecture of a self that has reorganized itself around the absence. Magic Man is what happens when someone brilliant and powerful loses everything they cared about and decides, over an unspecified long period, that caring was the mistake. He did not reach this conclusion suddenly. He reached it slowly, the way you arrive at wrong conclusions when you are in pain for long enough without the right support. One small surrender at a time, each one seeming reasonable in the moment, until the accumulation adds up to a self that is no longer recognizable as the person you started out being. The show does not excuse him, but it explains him, and the explanation is more interesting than a simple villain would be. Magic Man is what grief does to power without community. He is what the Ice King could have been if Simon Petrikov had had nobody to protect, if the crown had not bent his dissolution toward a particular shape of longing, if he had simply dissolved into something malicious without the thread of love pulling him forward. Adventure Time understands that isolation and grief and enormous power are a combination that tends to produce specific kinds of damage. It shows you the damage in characters like Magic Man without requiring you to either excuse the damage or pretend it does not have a cause. Extended Deep Dive Flame Princess and the Nature of True Self. Flame Princess enters the show as a love interest, which is the most surface reading of what she is. She is attractive and powerful and new, a character whose world is literally made of fire, whose emotions and whose dangerous nature are the same thing rather than being in tension. Finn falls for her with the specific, uncritical enthusiasm of a 14-year-old who has spent his whole life feeling things very intensely and finally found someone who seems to match that intensity. The deeper reading of Flame Princess is that she is the show's most concentrated meditation on the question of whether who you are is the same as what you were made to be. She was imprisoned as a child by her father, the Flame King, on the advice of Princess Bubblegum, who had calculated that Flame Princess's power had the potential, at full expression, to disrupt the fundamental chemistry of the planet. The imprisonment was a practical calculation made by practical people. It was also the formative experience of her childhood, being told, by the people who were supposed to know you best, that what you naturally are is so dangerous that it must be contained, that the most important thing about you is the threat you represent, that you must be managed rather than loved. This is not a neutral piece of information to carry through your development. When Flame Princess is eventually freed and begins experiencing the world directly, she is working with a self-concept built entirely around the idea that her nature is inherently destructive, that her strongest feelings are the ones that most need to be feared and suppressed, that being who she is damages the world around her. The relationship with Finn complicates this, because Finn sees her as fundamentally good rather than fundamentally dangerous, but Finn's perception is also limited by the fact that he does not fully understand what she is or what she contains. When Flame Princess eventually becomes the ruler of the Fire Kingdom, when she takes her place governing her own people rather than being managed by her father, or advised by Princess Bubblegum, or seen through the uncomplicated lens of Finn's affection, she steps into the most honest version of herself the show produces. She is complicated as a ruler. She makes decisions that are sometimes right and sometimes wrong. She navigates the specific difficulty of being a very powerful person who was told her whole life that her power was a problem, and discovering that the power is actually her resource, her responsibility, her gift to the people who depend on her. She is not fully realized. The show does not have enough episodes with her to complete the arc that her introduction implies. But what is there is the skeleton of something true about what it means to grow beyond the container you were given and discover that the thing people told you was dangerous is actually the thing that allows you to do good in the world, if you can find the right relationship to it. Extended Deep Dive: The Ethics of Memory and Forgetting. Adventure Time is deeply concerned with what it means to remember things and what it means to forget them. The question runs through almost every major character relationship and most of the show's significant plot turns, and the positions different characters occupy on this question tell you a great deal about who they are and what they have been through. Simon Petrikov forgets. He does not choose to forget. The forgetting is inflicted on him by the crown, which erases his memories of who he was and who he loved as part of the process of replacing him with the Ice King. The tragedy of his situation is the tragedy of involuntary forgetting, of losing access to the things that made you who you were, without having consented to or even fully understood what was happening to you. Marceline remembers. She is 1,000 years old and she remembers essentially all of it. The post-war ruins, her mother's death, Simon's care and departure, the centuries of wandering and building and losing, the specific texture of every relationship she has been in across a millennium of consciousness. Her memory is a gift and a burden simultaneously. It lets her honor what she has lost. It also means the losses remain as vivid to her as they were when they happened, not diminished by time the way human grief is diminished by forgetting. Finn carries memories in his vault that are not from his own life. Shoko's memories. The accumulated weight of past incarnations sealed behind a mental door because their presence would be too disorienting to carry consciously into the life he is currently living. The vault is the show's most interesting structural statement about the relationship between memory and identity. Some things need to be kept, but keeping them consciously is not always possible, and the solution is not forgetting but containment. The Lich does not forget anything. He carries 65 million years of continuous purpose without apparent degradation or confusion, which is its own form of horror. The ceaseless wheel does not lose its direction. Its clarity of purpose across an unimaginable span of time is not presented as admirable, but as a fundamental part of what makes it so threatening. Everything that lives and changes and struggles with memory is doing something the Lich cannot do: growing. The Lich is not growing. He is persisting, which is different. Princess Bubblegum's relationship to memory is selective in a way that the show treats as a character flaw. She has excellent institutional memory. She remembers the scientific and political and administrative history of the Candy Kingdom with precision. She is worse at remembering the personal, what she promised individuals, what she said and did in contexts that mattered to people even if they did not matter to the kingdom's functioning. The gap between these two kinds of memory is the gap between the ruler she has been and the person she is learning to also be. Memory in Adventure Time is not neutral. What you choose to carry forward, what you allow yourself to remember, and what you seal away and what you let be taken from you, tells you who you are in a deeper sense than almost any other form of self-knowledge the show offers. Extended Deep Dive: The World. The show trusts you to carry. Adventure Time is a show that trusts its audience in a way that not many animated properties do, and certainly not many animated properties primarily associated with children do. The trust operates at multiple levels, from the local trust of not explaining every joke or emotional beat to the structural trust of leaving major thematic work for the viewer to complete. The structural trust is the most important kind. When Adventure Time plants a detail in a Season 2 episode and does not pay it off until Season 6, it is trusting that the audience has been paying attention and will feel the payoff land with the weight of all the intervening episodes behind it. When it leaves the deer unexplained and the Pillow World ongoing and the exact nature of Oo's cosmological origins ambiguous, it is trusting that these open questions enrich rather than frustrate. When it ends on Simon human and alone and grieving in the aftermath of the finale, it is trusting that the audience can hold the complexity of a bittersweet ending without requiring a resolution that would cost the emotional truth of the thing that just happened. This trust is rare. Most long-form storytelling, particularly storytelling aimed at audiences that include children, tends toward over-explanation, toward assurance that things will be okay, toward resolutions that wrap up the emotional stakes in ways that leave the audience comfortable rather than thoughtful. Adventure Time's refusal of these conventions is not nihilism or a contrarian pose. It is a genuine belief that the audience is equipped to meet the show in the territory where it actually operates. The show communicates this trust directly in one of its most characteristic techniques: the cutaway. Adventure Time regularly ends scenes, and sometimes episodes, at the moment before an emotional resolution that a lesser show would labor through. It trusts you to know what the characters are feeling without having them articulate it. It trusts you to understand the weight of a look or a gesture, or an absence without explaining what the look means or why the gesture matters. This economy of emotional articulation, combined with the show's genuine depth of feeling, is what gives Adventure Time its specific tonal quality. It feels deeply emotional without being sentimental, which is an extraordinarily difficult balance to maintain across a decade of production. The show trusts you with the snail. It trusts you with Gunter. It trusts you with the population graph and the mushroom clouds in the title sequence, and the Lich's possession of the background, Easter egg, and all the other pieces of the world it left in the corners for you to find. It built an enormous and beautiful and complicated thing, and then it left you to find it. If you are here, you found it. That was always the deal. Layer 6. The Trenches. Cosmic Architecture. The Lich 65 million years of extinction. The Lich is introduced in Adventure Time as the primary antagonist, the most dangerous entity Finn and Jake encounter, the ancient evil whose periodic defeat and reemergence structures much of the show's major mythology. He is articulate about his goal in a way that most antagonists are not. He wants all life to end, not power over life, not dominion over it, the complete and permanent absence of any pattern of living organization anywhere in the universe. He is, the show eventually makes clear, much older than anything connected to the Mushroom War. Far older than human civilization, far older than humanity itself. The Lich's soul arrived on Earth 65 million years ago in the form of a green catalyst comet. In the episode Evergreen, set 65 million years in the past, you can see this comet approaching, trailing the horn-shaped flames and the green coloration that Adventure Time uses as the Lich's consistent visual signature throughout the show. This is the catalyst comet that caused the mass extinction event that ended the age of the dinosaurs. The Lich's desire for extinction has been shaping life on Earth for 65 million years. The event that ended the dinosaurs was not random. It was the Lich arriving. After the comet impact, the Lich's soul remained on Earth without a suitable physical form, dormant but present, waiting for the conditions that would allow him to manifest more fully. Those conditions arrived with the mushroom bomb. The mutagenic energy of the bomb's detonation provided the Lich's soul with physical form in a person exposed to the blast. This is the Lich that Finn and Jake first encounter. The enormous skeletal figure, the green fire eyes, the voice that radiates ancient and absolute certainty about the correctness of everything's ending. The Lich calls himself the last scholar of Golb and the ceaseless wheel. The scholar designation means he is not simply a servant of Golb or a blunt instrument of cosmic entropy. He is a student of Golb's nature, a being who has intellectually engaged with what Golb is and what Golb desires, and concluded that Golb is right. He believes in extinction with the conviction of someone who has thought through the question carefully and arrived at a settled answer. He is not blindly following a directive. He endorses his own mission. The ceaseless wheel indicates something about his relationship to defeat. The Lich does not experience being stopped as failure in any meaningful sense. He experiences it as a temporary condition of an ongoing process. He has been defeated before, across 65 million years of this planet's history. He will be defeated again. He will continue. He is the recurring expression of the force that wants all of this to be over, and that force does not stop wanting what it wants just because it has been temporarily stopped. Farm World, what happens when you try to remove the problem? When Finn wishes that the Lich never even ever existed, Prismo interprets this wish in the most direct available terms. The Lich's physical existence in the Prime timeline traces to the mushroom bomb's detonation. The most direct path to a world without the Lich is a world where the bomb never went off. In the Farm World timeline that Prismo creates, Simon Petrikov sacrificed his life to stop the mushroom bomb mid-flight, freezing himself along with the weapon before it could detonate. This means Simon died rather than being preserved and slowly transformed. The cataclysmic version of the Mushroom War did not occur. Finn's biological family are alive and living as poor farmers. Jake is a regular dog without stretchy powers. Marceline is dead, because without the specific post-war conditions that shaped her life, and without Simon's protection during her most vulnerable years, she did not survive. Princess Bubblegum never formed, because the mother gum required the specific chemical and energetic conditions of the post-war environment to emerge. From a distance, a world where humans survived intact looks like an improvement. Then Farm World Finn encounters the Ice Crown. The dormant mushroom bomb, no longer frozen by Simon's sacrifice, detonates 600 years late. Farm World Jake is exposed to the mutagenic waste and becomes the host for a Farm World Lich. The specific form of the catastrophe changed. The catastrophe itself remained. Adventure Time makes this argument explicitly and without softening it. You cannot wish large-scale evil away. You cannot solve the problem of the lich by removing the lich, because the lich is a symptom of conditions that persist even in his absence. The conditions are what need addressing, and conditions are harder to address than symptoms, and nobody is offering Finn a wish that would deal with conditions. After Finn and Jake are returned to the Prime timeline, the farm world continues to exist as a branching, alternate reality. The decision and its consequences are permanent, living somewhere in the multiverse where all choices and all their outcomes persist simultaneously. The farm world lich's severed hand falls through a portal connecting to every dimension and continues its work across realities. The cost of the wish has no end date. The multiverse as consequence. Adventure Time's multiverse exists primarily as a space where consequences live when they cannot fit inside the world that generated them. This differs from how most fictional multiverses function. Most fictional multiverses are about possibility. What if things had gone differently? Adventure Time uses its multiverse for accountability more than possibility. The consequences of decisions made in one world reach further than anyone intended. The multiverse is where they go when they outgrow the world that produced them. The farm world lich's hand spreading across the multiverse is not an interesting alternate reality story. It is the physical form of what happens when you try to solve a problem by removing its specific expression without dealing with its root causes. It is the consequence of the wish, made tangible and given the ability to reach into worlds the wish never intended to affect. The Citadel, the prison floating between realities, exists because some beings are too dangerous for any single world to contain, but too persistent to simply eliminate. When the Lich destroys the Citadel in Season 6, the multiverse is not just providing a plot point. The prison breaking is consequences. Escaping containment. Layer 7 below the trenches. The most ancient things. Golb, the oldest and the last. When Golb appears in Come Along With Me, the Adventure Time series finale, the show does not spend time explaining what it is. It arrives. It is enormous. It begins consuming the world it encounters. The battle already in progress between the Candy Kingdom forces and Gumbald's coalition becomes immediately and completely irrelevant, because neither side has any frame of reference for what is now present. Golb is a chaos deity in the fullest sense Adventure Time employs. It is not evil in the way the Lich is evil, with specific goals and specific hatred and specific targets. Golb is the dissolution of pattern, the return of organized material to formlessness, the appetite for the absence of all structures, including those that distinguish one thing from another. Where organized existence wants to maintain itself, Golb is the force that wants the opposite. The show has been pointing toward GOLB throughout its run, in ways that become clear only in retrospect. The Lich calls himself GOLB's scholar. Magic Man's wife Margles was taken by Golb long before the finale, and Golb's action in taking her sent Magic Man into the grief madness that defined his behavior across years of occasional appearances. Golb's presence in Adventure Time's history is older and more pervasive than the finale might suggest if you arrive there without the preceding decade of accumulated context. The resolution involves Betty, who had planned to use the crown in its wish-granting state to wish Simon free of its influence. Inside Golb, the creature's process reverts everything to its natural state. Simon becomes himself again, human and free of the crown's influence for the first time in over 1,000 years. Betty also becomes human again, briefly, and has the reunion with Simon that both of them have been reaching toward across the entire run of the show. Betty uses the crown's wish to protect Simon and expel him from Golb. She uses her wish for him as the last thing she can give, and the wish that protects him also seals her inside Golb and fuses her with it. The entity that leaves Ooh at the end of the finale is Golb and Betty together, something new, something the show does not characterize beyond the fact of its departure. Simon is left in the aftermath, human again after centuries, free of the crown's influence, and without Betty, which is the condition he has been in one form or another, since 1986. Orgalorg's complete history. Orgalorg was, in his original form, an entity of cosmic scale whose primary ambition was absorbing catalyst comets, those periodic cosmic forces of fundamental change. Being capable of absorbing these forces and accumulating them would become, in functional terms, incomparably powerful. Orgolorg understood this and pursued it across an unimaginable span of time. The yellow catalyst comet that Orgolorg attempted to intercept was carrying the force that would eventually incarnate as Finn. Abraham Lincoln, governing Mars with the particular authority the show assigns him, dispatched Grob Gob Globgrod to prevent this. They incapacitated Orgolorg and sent him falling toward Earth. The planet's gravity and atmospheric pressure compressed Orgolorg's enormous form over thousands of years, pressing his vast cosmic presence down into something that occupies the space of a small bird. He did not die. He is still Orgolorg. The compression is physical and complete, but not erasive. The memories are dormant. The power is suppressed by physics. The ambient awareness that something much larger used to occupy this space persists in the small body that now contains him. He waddles around the Ice Kingdom smashing glasses off counters, and in some functional sense, this is the Breaker of Worlds doing the most compression-appropriate version of what he has always done. Abraham Lincoln, King of Mars. The fact that Abraham Lincoln is the King of Mars in Adventure Time is presented early in the show with the complete seriousness that Adventure Time applies to all of its absurdist premises. It is not a joke waiting for a punchline. It is a piece of cosmological information delivered with the same tone the show uses for everything else. Lincoln appears at crucial moments in the show's mythology. He dispatched Grob Gob Globgrod to deal with Orgolorg. He appears when Finn needs to receive genuinely important information about his nature and his choices. He is not a background absurdity. The specific selection of Lincoln is worth sitting with because Adventure Time does not make choices like this arbitrarily. Lincoln is remembered historically as someone who held something together under conditions that were actively tearing it apart, who made decisions under extraordinary pressure with permanent consequences, who carried an enormous weight with documented difficulty and did not put it down until someone made him. The qualities of his historical memory, persistence under impossible pressure, willingness to absorb enormous cost for the sake of principles he had decided were worth it, are consistent with the role he plays in Adventure Time's cosmological structure. The King of Mars, who dispatched a divine agent to preserve the force of life and heroism from being absorbed by the Breaker of Worlds, is doing exactly what you would expect from someone whose historical memory is built around the preservation of something valuable at enormous cost. Prismo, what a dream can be. Prismo lives at the center of time in a room that touches all timelines simultaneously without being inside any of them. The walls are covered with screens showing every moment that has ever happened or will happen, all occurring at once in the eternal present of the time room. He appears as a two-dimensional being, pink and yellow, floating in a space decorated like a comfortable 1980s hangout with beanbags and enormous screens and a jar of pickles on a shelf. Because if you are going to be trapped at the center of time forever, you might as well make it comfortable. He grants wishes, any wish that can be clearly articulated, one per person per lifetime. He interprets the literal language of wishes without the malicious cleverness that fictional wish-granting entities often deploy. He is bound by rules older than the universe he serves, rules that say desire must be honored even when desire wants to unmake everything. Prismo is the dream of an old man. This is not a metaphor. An old man is sleeping somewhere. His dream takes the form of a two-dimensional wish-granting entity at the center of time, who forms genuine friendships and experiences genuine emotions and has a real relationship with the cosmos. The dream and the dreamer are as causally entangled as any two things in Adventure Time. When the old man dies, Prismo ceases to exist. When the old man is allowed to sleep again, Prismo returns. What does this make Prismo? He has relationships. He befriends Jake and watches movies with him and talks about sandwiches. He grieves when friends are lost. He experiences joy when they come back. He is warm and funny and genuinely invested in the people who enter his space. He is also, simultaneously, a dream. Both of these things are fully true. Neither one cancels the other. The origin of your existence does not determine whether your existence is real. Prismo is real. Prismo is a dream. Adventure Time holds both of these facts at once without requiring you to choose between them. Layer 8. The Hidden Layer. Production History. Pendleton Ward and the Weight of Making Something True. Pendleton Ward is the origin of Adventure Time. He made the short. He built the world. He conceived of Ooh and Finn and Jake and the specific tonal register that makes the show what it is, the mixture of warmth and darkness, and philosophical depth and genuine comedy that you cannot replicate in any other combination. He stepped back from the show somewhere around seasons 5 and 6, reducing his direct involvement in day-to-day production in ways that were never formally announced but became visible to people paying careful attention. The show continued to produce extraordinary work under Adam Muto and the writing room that had been living in OO for years. But the gap existed, and it existed because creating something that becomes enormous and deeply personal simultaneously carries a weight that changes your relationship to it in ways that are not always comfortable or sustainable. When a show you made from the inside of your own imagination becomes beloved by millions of people, the expectations accumulate, the responsibility accumulates. The gap between what you imagined and what has to be produced for a large audience and a major network widens in ways that can make the original imaginative impulse harder to access. Ward has spoken in various contexts about the difficulty of this. He needed to step back. He stepped back. He came back for the finale. His presence in Come Along With Me is felt in the specific balance between emotional stakes and emotional warmth. In the willingness to let the ending be genuinely bittersweet rather than fully resolved, in the trust placed in the audience to carry the weight of what the show built. The show ended the way it needed to end. Rebecca Sugar's foundational contributions. Rebecca Sugar was a writer and storyboard artist on Adventure Time from early in the show's run until she departed to create Steven Universe. Her contributions to Adventure Time are woven into the show so thoroughly that separating them from the larger fabric requires close attention to specific production histories. Sugar wrote or co-wrote many of the show's most emotionally significant episodes. I Remember You, which aired in Season 5, is frequently identified by viewers as the episode that affected them most profoundly. The episode follows the Ice King and Marceline in an attempt to write a song together. Its structure is a dual study, the Ice King in his current confused, lonely state, trying to connect with Marceline without understanding why he feels connected to her. And Marceline, who knows exactly who the Ice King used to be, and cannot communicate that knowledge across the cognitive gulf his transformation has created. The episode ends with Marceline reading Simon's old letter aloud, a document of love and fear and loss written by someone who is gone, living now in the body of someone who does not remember writing it. When Sugar left to develop Steven Universe, the show she created demonstrates clearly that the creative philosophy she built and refined in the Adventure Time room went with her. The two shows share DNA in ways that are visible and important. The understanding of how animation aimed at children can carry genuine emotional weight, can engage with grief and identity, and complicated love with real seriousness, was developed in the Adventure Time room, and Sugar's departure carried it to a different space, where it produced a different show with many of the same values. kingafu.tumblr.com. During the show's active production years, a Tumblr account operating under the name King of Fu was maintained by the Adventure Time production team and functioned as something unusual and difficult to categorize. The account posted content as though characters from the show were themselves posting, as though the land of Oo had internet access and its residents were using it with the same casual, idiosyncratic energy they brought to everything else. The posts were character-specific and frequently very funny. They sometimes provided context for things happening in the show, offered additional texture for characters who appeared only briefly in episodes, and in general created a layer of the world that existed in a parallel digital space rather than in any single episode. For viewers who found it, the account was a private door into an expanded version of the show, a secret the production was sharing with whoever was paying close enough attention to look. The account has largely ceased updating as the show wound down, and accessing it now is its own form of archaeology. Going back through the archive of posts is finding the layer of a world that existed in a specific time and a specific digital space, and it is a reminder that Adventure Time at its peak was not simply a television show. It overflowed its medium. The people making it loved it enough to keep building it in the corners, in the margins, in the spaces between official episodes. Jeremy Shada, the voice that grew up. Jeremy Shada was a child when Adventure Time began. He voiced Finn throughout the show's entire run, from the premiere to the finale and through the Distant Lands specials. He was not replaced when his voice changed, as is standard practice for animated productions featuring child characters. The result is something genuinely unusual in animation, a character whose voice authentically aged over the course of the show's production, tracking the real physical development of the human being supplying it. Listen carefully across the seasons, and you can hear Jeremy Shada growing up. The voice that supplies Finn in the earliest episodes and the voice that supplies Finn in the later seasons belong to the same person but at meaningfully different points in that person's development. In 17, the episode explicitly marking Finn turning 17, the show acknowledges the passage of time that the voice had been quietly tracking throughout. Finn is older, the voice is older. The fiction and the reality align in a way that they rarely do in animation, and the alignment creates something specific and moving that would not be possible if an adult voice actor had been playing Finn from the beginning. Layer 9, The Bottomless Dark, The Strangest Corners, 3000 to 9, and the material that did not air. In Adventure Time's production numbering system, an episode designated 3000 to 9 is one that fan communities have discussed for years, with a combination of genuine uncertainty and accumulated speculation that has made it difficult to separate confirmed information from what has been invented or embellished over time. What is clearly true is that Adventure Time produced material that was modified or removed before airing, which is true of essentially any long-running animated production. The show's creative team regularly reached toward darker and stranger content than Cartoon Network standards for children's animation officially permitted, and the process of making Adventure Time across 10 seasons involved a consistent negotiation between what the writers wanted to explore and what the network could support. Whether 3000 to 9 represents one of these cases in a particularly dramatic way, whether it describes an episode with content sufficiently dark that it was definitively shelved rather than modified, is genuinely unclear from publicly available information. The entry exists as a marker of real uncertainty rather than a confirmed and documented story. What the entry communicates accurately about Adventure Time's creative culture is this: the show was always reaching toward material at the edge of what its platform supported, and there were things that did not make it through. The full Adventure Time that existed in the creative room and the Adventure Time that aired on television were not identical. The gap between them is one of the show's hidden histories: the deer and unresolved presence. The deer appears in multiple Adventure Time episodes in the background of scenes, always at a slight angle to what is happening in the foreground, always in positions that feel specifically wrong in ways difficult to articulate precisely. It turns up in doorways and behind trees and at the edges of scenes. It watches. The deer is not a character with dialogue or storyline. It is not explained or identified or given motivation within the show. It accumulates across appearances into something that feels deliberate without ever being made explicit. In a show that used background details with extraordinary intentionality, a recurring, unexplained presence is exactly the kind of thing that rewards careful attention. Whether the deer was an intentional long-game mystery that was never paid off, a production joke that accumulated unintended gravity through repetition, or a story element planned and then dropped when the episode that would have explained it did not get made, is not publicly known. It lives permanently in the space between intentional and accidental, which is, as it turns out, where several of Adventure Time's most interesting things live. The "it's all a dream" theory, the full version. We have visited this theory at the surface. Here is where it gets as deep as it goes. The structural fact at the center of the theory is canonical and confirmed. Prismo, whose cosmological significance to Adventure Time cannot be overstated, exists because a sleeping old man is dreaming him. The dream is fully real. Prismo is fully conscious, fully relational, fully capable of experiencing the world and being experienced by others. He is also, unambiguously, a dream. Both of these things are simultaneously and completely true. The theory asks whether the principle Prismo embodies extends. If a dream can be this real, if the distinction between dream and reality is this permeable in Adventure Time's cosmology, what else might be a dream? The vault in Finn's mind is relevant. The vault is described as a space where Finn seals things he does not want to confront, and what it contains are memories of past incarnations, lives lived in other bodies in other eras. The vault is mind made into geography, psychological interior given spatial properties. In a show where Prismo's existence demonstrates that minds and their contents can become fully real and fully external, the vault is pointing towards something. The more developed version of the theory proposes that Adventure Time's entire world is the externalized interior of some mind, and that the specific quality of that mind, the warm grief of it, the way it is built from catastrophe and populated with love anyway, the way it holds darkness and brightness in the same space without resolving the tension between them, tells you something about the kind of consciousness dreaming it. This theory cannot be confirmed from the show's text. It also cannot be dismissed from the show's text. Adventure Time leaves it open with the deliberateness of a show that understands some things are more honest as questions than as answers. The meaning of the show holds whether Ooh is an actual post-apocalyptic world or someone's dream of what such a world might be. The people in it are real either way. The love is real either way. Princess Bubblegum's Future Shadow. Several pieces of Adventure Time supplementary material, including official tie-in comics, contain glimpses of the future of Ooh that are not unambiguously hopeful. Some of these materials suggest that Princess Bubblegum's governance of the Candy Kingdom becomes something harder and more controlling in the years after the main series concludes, that the tendencies towards surveillance and managed order that the show acknowledged during the run expand without the counterweight provided by the relationships that kept her accountable. The possible future suggested in some of these materials shows a Candy Kingdom with a different quality from the one in the show. More totalizing, less warm. The order maintained through means the princess of the main series would have at least paused before employing. Something has tipped. The canonical status of supplementary material relative to confirmed story is always complicated, and Adventure Time's supplementary material exists in various degrees of official endorsement. But the suggestion is consistent with what the show itself established clearly. Princess Bubblegum's trajectory, absent the checks that genuine relationships provide, pointed in a concerning direction. She knew this. The show made sure she confronted it, gave her characters and situations that forced her to see what unchecked power does to a person who already has difficulty fully accounting for her choices. Whether those confrontations ultimately held is the question some of the supplementary material answers in the most sobering available way. The Pillow World's ongoing after. Rose Linen is still there. This seems obvious, but it has a specific weight that the show's forward momentum makes easy to pass over. When Finn stepped through the portal that opened in the Pillow World and it closed behind him, the Pillow World did not end. It continued. Everyone who lived in it continued living. The old Finn, who had spent decades there and built a life and loved people, and then walked through a glowing door and was gone, left a specific absence in a specific world that keeps going. From Rose Linen's perspective, her husband left. From their children's perspective, their father left. They presumably had the rest of their lives after that moment, growing and changing and being shaped by the loss of someone who was there for decades and then was not, and Adventure Time does not return to tell any of that story. The Pillow World exists somewhere in the multiverse, carrying the continuation of lives that Finn interrupted and could not stay for, and the show trusts you to hold that knowledge without requiring it to be resolved or officially closed. It is the most persistent consequence of an adventure that Adventure Time ever left open. Not a villain escaped or a timeline branched, but a family that was made and then had one of its people choose to leave, and kept existing after the leaving. Layer 10 Connections and Conclusions. What Adventure Time was always doing. The shape of the whole. Stand at the bottom of the iceberg and look up through all the layers we have descended through, and here is what becomes visible from this vantage point. Adventure Time is a show about catastrophe and what grows in the aftermath. About the world that forms in the ruins of the previous world, the beings and relationships and civilizations that emerge when everything before them has been mostly destroyed. About the specific character of life that exists in a place whose history is enormous grief, and about whether that life can be good despite the grief, or even specifically because of it. The Mushroom War is never shown in full. It is present in background details and brief references, and the world's architecture and the population chart in high strangeness, and one brief series of images in the show's opening credits if you look carefully at the right frames. It is a wound the show carries rather than displays, which is the realistic way that actual catastrophe functions in the lives of the people who survive it. You do not dwell continuously on the worst thing that happened. You carry it with you into every subsequent day and build around it and through it and despite it. Every major character in the show is an inheritor of the catastrophe in a specific way. Finn is the last or near last human, living in a world built from the ruins of his species' civilization, carrying in his body the essential force of life and heroism that predates even the civilization that was destroyed. Princess Bubblegum emerged from the post-war chemistry the mushroom bomb created and has spent over 800 years building civilization from the beginning, in the absence of the species that used to be responsible for it. Marceline is the daughter of the human world that ended, and the demonic world that exists alongside all human worlds, carrying both heritages and belonging fully to neither, carrying 1,000 years of evidence that love and loss tend to arrive together. Simon Petrikov was preserved by the crown's immortality through a millennium he never wanted to live, paying for the preservation with everything he was. Jake carries alien DNA and a history he did not know about for most of his life, finding his true form decades after his life began and choosing, when he finally understands what that form is, to continue being Jake. They are all managing something. They are all doing the ongoing work of lives built inside and around a catastrophe that did not ask their permission and did not offer them alternatives. What the show was arguing. Adventure Time was arguing something specific and patient and true across its entire run, making the argument in the most effective way available to fiction, by showing you what it looks like rather than by telling you what it means. The argument is that connection is what survives catastrophe, that the specific thing which persists through the worst available events, which is neither eliminated by the mushroom bomb nor dissolved by the ice crown nor diminished by 1,000 years of wandering, is the capacity to reach toward other people and find something real there. Simon reaching toward Marceline in the ruins of the post-war world, choosing to lose himself piece by piece so that she could survive. Marceline reaching toward the Ice King across the cognitive gulf of his transformation, maintaining a relationship with the ghost of someone she loved, because the ghost is what is available. Finn reaching toward every person he encounters with the specific quality of heroic attention that the Catalyst Comet has been trying to carry across deep time. Jake reaching toward everyone with the specific warmth that makes him who he is regardless of what his biology was supposed to make him. The Lich is the counter-argument made into a character, the force that says all connection and all life should be dissolved, that the pattern of living beings reaching toward each other is itself the thing that should be ended. Adventure Time does not defeat the Lich through argument. It simply shows you, over hundreds of episodes, what connection looks like when it works, what it costs people to maintain, why it is worth the cost, and then lets you draw your own conclusions about what the Lich is proposing as an alternative. Prismo keeps pickles fresh, because maybe today someone will come and he will not want to offer them stale ones. Tree Trunks makes apple pies for the Lich reborn as a child, because a child needs to be fed and loved regardless of what it started as. The snail waves from the background of every adventure because waving is what you do when you are glad to be here. What Finn was and what he chose. Finn's story is, at its bottom, a story about the choice to stay in the world you have rather than ascending to something purer and simpler and less costly. Every time the Catalyst Comet offered him transcendence, every time the universe provided an opportunity to leave the embodied world behind and exist as something less subject to loss and grief, and the specific pain of caring about people who can be taken away, Finn chose to stay. He chose He chose Jake in the tree fort and the adventures and the mortality and all of the weight that comes with being present in a world that has the ability to hurt you. His father made the opposite choice. Martin took the comet's offer and left. The two decisions, made in the same moment in the same place, illuminate both characters more completely than anything else either of them does across the show's entire run. Finn's death, depicted in Together Again, with the quiet dignity of something that was always going to happen and was handled the way it deserved to be handled, is not a tragedy in the register that most fictional deaths occupy. It is the completion of a life fully lived in the choice he made. He stayed. He was mortal because he chose the mortal world, and mortality means ending, and he ended. And then in the afterlife he found Jake, who went ahead of him, and they went on one more adventure together, being exactly who they were. The force that Finn carried, the quality that arrived on Earth 65 million years ago in a comet and has been choosing the embodied world in every incarnation since, chose the world again and again until Finn's particular life was finished. Whatever comes next in the sequence of incarnations will make the same choice, because that is what the force is. It is the quality of saying yes to the world as it is, with all of its catastrophe and all of its warmth, and reaching toward the people in it regardless of the cost. The architecture of the world that survived. Strip away the mythology and the cosmic entities, and the alternate timelines and the ancient primordial forces and the 65 million years of history and the nuclear ruins and the population charts and the dreaming old man at the center of time. And Adventure Time is a show about something very simple, about what it means to be alive in a world that has been broken and about what the people alive in that world do with the fact of the breaking, about whether love persists through catastrophe, about whether the relationships built in ruins are real, and whether what grows in devastated ground can be genuinely good, and whether choosing to stay and keep trying matters when the original thing you were trying to protect is already gone. The show's answer, given patiently and specifically and without false consolation across 10 seasons and multiple specials, is yes. Yes to all of it. The love persists. The relationships are real. What grows in devastated ground can be genuinely beautiful. Choosing to stay and keep trying matters, not because it changes the outcome of the catastrophe that already happened, but because it changes the character of what comes after. The candy was always real. The warmth was always real. The mathematical and the beautiful and the strange and the sweet were not hiding the darkness. They were the same as the darkness. They were what the darkness produced when the people who survived it chose to keep reaching toward each other anyway. Ooh is a world built from the ruins of our own, and it is beautiful, and the people living in it are managing something enormous, and they are also having breakfast, and going on adventures, and writing fan fiction to sleeping penguins, and making apple pies for the most ancient evil in the universe, because it has been born again as a baby and it is hungry, and none of those things are in tension with each other. They are the same thing. In the tree fort, somewhere in Ooh, on a morning that comes 1,000 years after the worst day in human history, Finn wakes up and Jake is there, and they have breakfast, and they go find something worth doing. And they keep doing this, episode after episode, season after season, until the show ends, and they keep doing it somewhere past the end of the show where the camera cannot follow them anymore. That is the argument. That is what Adventure Time was always about. Mathematical. If you made it all the way here, through every layer of this iceberg, you are exactly the kind of person this video was made for. Leave me a comment telling me which part of this landed hardest for you, which layer changed something about how you see the show, which piece of information is going to stay with you the next time you watch an episode. If you have not subscribed yet, that button is right there, and it would mean everything to have you here. We go deep on things. We will keep going deep. And wherever you are in the world tonight, whatever time shows on your clock, whatever you are settling under or settling into, rest well. Adventure Time built something real. It is still here. It will be here when you wake up. In some version of some timeline, Finn and Jake are out there right now, waking up in the tree fort, heading into whatever the day has for them. They always will be. End of script. One final layer: why it mattered. Every great piece of creative work eventually raises the question of why it mattered beyond its own boundaries, what it gave to the people who encountered it that they carried back out into the world with them. What did Adventure Time give? It gave people permission to take animated storytelling seriously at a time when that was not the obvious thing to do. It gave people who grew up watching it a model for how you can hold enormous sadness and enormous warmth in the same place without one canceling the other. It gave people a vocabulary for the specific grief of watching someone you love lose themselves in the Ice King and Simon and the space between them. It gave people permission to love things unself-consciously, to engage with a brightly colored cartoon about a boy and his dog, and call that engagement legitimate and important and real. It also gave people something harder to name but probably more important, the sense that the world they live in, which is also built on ruins, which is also carrying its history in its landscape, which is also full of people who are managing something and reaching toward each other anyway, is something worth building in. The Mushroom War was not a real event. Ooh is not a real place. Finn and Jake are not real people. But the argument they embody, the argument that connection is worth the cost of vulnerability, that love persists through catastrophe, that choosing to stay in the difficult real world rather than ascending to something colder and simpler is the right choice, that argument is as real as arguments get. And the show made it over and over, across 10 seasons and multiple specials, through comedy and horror and mythology and character and music, and the tiny persistent wave of a small snail at the edge of every frame, because it believed you were ready to hear it. Were you? Mathematical. The show ran from April 2010 to September 2018. That is 8 years of regular episodes, 4 Distant Lands specials, an ongoing miniseries revival, and the kind of cultural imprint that does not fade because it is built into the specific years when the people who watched it were becoming who they are. The people who watched Adventure Time as children in 2010 are young adults now. They carry the show in them. the way you carry the things that shaped you when you were still being shaped. That is the final layer of the iceberg, not a plot detail or a piece of production history or a cosmological revelation. Just the fact that a show about a boy and his dog in a candy-colored world that is secretly built on tragedy gave something real to the people who found it, and those people carry it forward, and that carrying forward is the most ordinary and most important form of immortality that stories achieve. Adventure Time built something real. It is still real. It will keep being real in the people it shaped, which is the best possible thing a story can do. Go find it if you have not. Go back to it if you have. There is more in there than you remember, and there always will be. That is all 10 layers. That is everything from the warm surface to the cold bottom. If this video kept you company tonight, or helped you drift off somewhere quiet, or made you want to go back and rewatch something you loved once, then it did exactly what it was supposed to do. Sweet dreams! You earned them.